All gone because we can't find one person who speaks Mandarin. 6 words, $500 million. One woman invisible in the corner. CEO Gavin Rourke stood in Chicago's most expensive conference room watching his empire crumble. Translator in surgery, Chinese delegation arriving early, every backup plan dead. His executives went pale. His phone died. His future collapsed in real time. And in the corner, emptying trash like furniture, a hotel maid named Nia Caldwell heard everything. She spoke fluent Mandarin, perfect, educated, dangerous. But she'd learned what happens when the help steps out of line. Warnings, humiliation, erasure. So she stayed silent until she couldn't anymore. Before we begin, if you're enjoying this story, please like this video and comment with the city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, let's dive in. The glass walls of Conference Room 47B at the Meridian Grand Hotel reflected everything back in brutal clarity. The Chicago skyline cutting through afternoon clouds, the polished mahogany table that cost more than most people's cars, and Gavin Rourke's face as it cycled through every shade of corporate panic. Say that again. His voice came out flat, dangerous. Slowly, Amanda Chen, his chief operating officer, didn't flinch. She'd worked with Gavin for 12 years, long enough to know that his calm was more terrifying than his rage. Marcus is in emergency surgery, ruptured appendix. He's been in the OR for 40 minutes. Marcus was our translator. Yes. For the meeting that starts in... Gavin checked his Patek Philippe, the watch that had cost him a small fortune and now felt like counting down to execution. 2 hours and 18 minutes. Yes. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Around the table, 5 executives sat frozen in their Herman Miller chairs, their faces arranged in carefully neutral expressions that barely masked the panic spreading through the room like nerve gas. Gavin turned to Richard Morrison, VP of Operations, whose entire job was solving impossible problems before they became disasters. Options. Richard cleared his throat, glancing down at his tablet where a dozen text conversations were dying in real time. I've contacted every translation service in Chicago. The 3 agencies we use regularly are fully booked. Corporate conferences, legal depositions, medical appointments. I tried the University of Chicago's language department, Northwestern, DePaul. Every graduate student with Mandarin proficiency is either already working or unavailable on this short notice. What about remote interpretation? Video call? Chairman Liang's team was explicit in their advanced communications. This came from Jessica Park, Director of International Business Development, who had spent 3 months setting up this single meeting. Her voice carried the careful precision of someone delivering bad news to a man who could destroy her career with a signature. They consider remote translation disrespectful for negotiations of this magnitude. It signals that we view them as secondary. In Chinese business culture, especially with a partnership this substantial, face-to-face interaction is non-negotiable. Gavin pressed his palms flat against the table. The wood was cool, solid, real, unlike everything else in his world right now. Then we postpone. We can't. Jessica's voice cracked slightly. Chairman Liang is flying to Tokyo tomorrow morning for another deal. This meeting is the only window. If we postpone, we're not rescheduling. We're dead. They'll see it as American unreliability and move forward with the German manufacturer who's been courting them for 6 months. The silence that followed had weight to it, pressure, like being underwater. Through the glass walls, Nia Caldwell could see all of it. She'd been cleaning Conference Room 47B for 40 minutes, moving through her routine with the practiced invisibility of someone who'd learned long ago that being noticed meant being targeted. Empty the trash bins, wipe down the credenza, check the coffee station, refill water pitchers, replace used glasses, clean the whiteboard, vacuum under the table. The Meridian Grand had trained her well. Stay quiet, stay efficient, stay invisible. Make eye contact only when spoken to. Never speak unless asked a direct question. Wear the gray uniform that marked you as service staff. Move through their spaces like you're not quite real. Most days, Nia was grateful for the invisibility. It meant she could work without harassment, without constant supervision, without the kind of attention that made her skin crawl. She'd had other jobs. Retail positions where male customers felt entitled to her smile, her attention, her patience. Restaurant work where she'd been grabbed, propositioned, cornered in walk-in freezers by men who knew she needed the tips too badly to complain. Hotel housekeeping was better. The uniform created distance. The tasks were clear. The guests barely saw her, and when they did, most treated her like automated furniture, useful, unremarkable, easily replaced. But it also meant that moments like this happened. 6 highly educated, wealthy, powerful people having a complete meltdown about a problem she could solve in 3 seconds. What about the translator we used for the Tokyo expansion last year? This from David Wu, CFO, grasping at straws. The woman who handled the Suzuki negotiations? She moved to Singapore. Richard was scrolling through his contacts with increasing desperation. I already checked. Freelance translators. Every certified Mandarin interpreter in the Chicago area is booked solid. There's apparently some international medical conference at McCormick Place, plus 2 legal depositions requiring sworn translation. It's like every Chinese speaker in Illinois decided to be busy today. Amanda leaned forward, her expression grim. We could try offering more money, triple rate, quadruple. I already offered $5,000 for 2 hours of work. Richard's laugh was bitter. One translator told me she'd love to help, but she's currently mid-flight to San Francisco. Another is home with COVID. A third said, and I quote, I'd need to violate the space-time continuum to get there, and my rate for that is significantly higher than $5,000. Gavin stood abruptly, his chair rolling backward and hitting the credenza with a dull thump that made Nia pause mid-reach toward a coffee cup. She watched him pace to the window, his silhouette sharp against the afternoon light. He was tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of man who'd probably been an athlete in college before business school, and 100-hour work weeks softened him into this current version, expensively tailored, well-maintained, radiating authority that came from years of having his commands obeyed without question. His hair was going gray at the temples in a way that magazines probably called distinguished. His hands, when he pressed them against the window glass, were smooth, no calluses, no scars, hands that had never done hard labor. Tell me exactly what we're losing here. His voice was quiet now, which somehow made it worse. Exact numbers. Jessica pulled up a document on her tablet, though Nia suspected she had these figures memorized. Apex Technologies has been negotiating with Liang Manufacturing for 8 months. They produce high-precision components for our new generation of industrial automation systems. If this partnership goes through, we're looking at a 5-year contract worth approximately $480 million in revenue. They're offering manufacturing capacity we can't replicate domestically, not at this quality level, not at this price point, not in this time frame. And if it doesn't go through, then we're 18 months behind our product launch schedule, our Q4 projections are completely fictional, and the board starts asking why you spent $12 million on R&D for products we can't manufacture. Also, there's a decent chance we get hit with breach of contract lawsuits from 3 major clients who have deposits on products we suddenly can't deliver. David added, his voice tight. The stock price would crater. We'd be looking at layoffs, possibly restructuring. The German manufacturer would swoop in, secure the Liang partnership, and we'd spend the next 5 years playing catch-up while they dominate the market we were supposed to own. Gavin was silent for a long moment, still staring out at Chicago spread below him like a game board where he was suddenly losing. This is insane. This cannot be falling apart because we can't find one person who speaks Mandarin. Nia's hands tightened on the coffee cup she was holding. One person who speaks Mandarin. She'd been speaking Mandarin since before she could properly speak English. Her mother, Lin Caldwell, née Lin Wei, had immigrated from Guangzhou when she was 23, pregnant, following an American husband who'd seemed like an adventure and turned out to be a mistake. The husband had left before Nia turned 2. Some story about Alaska and new opportunities that her mother mentioned exactly once and never again. Lin had raised Nia alone, working double shifts at a garment factory, speaking Mandarin at home with an iron insistence that her daughter would never forget where she came from. English for America, she'd said, over and over, in Mandarin. But Mandarin for yourself, for your mind, for your soul, never forget. So Nia hadn't forgotten. She'd grown up bilingual, moving between worlds. Mandarin with her mother and her mother's friends from the factory, English everywhere else. She'd attended Chinese school on Saturdays until she was 16, studying classical texts and modern business Mandarin, while her American classmates were sleeping in or working part-time jobs. She'd even started college, 2 years at community college, planning to transfer to a 4-year university for international business. That dream had died quietly, buried under student loans and real life, and the kind of financial pressures that turn plans into fantasies. Her mother had gotten sick, lung disease, from years of textile dust, and Nia had dropped out to work full-time, juggling home healthcare costs and her own survival. Now she was 36, a single mother of 2, cleaning hotel conference rooms and speaking perfect Mandarin to exactly no one. She set down the coffee cup and moved toward the trash bin near the door, timing her movements to be unobtrusive. The executives were spiraling now, their panic breaking through professional veneers. "We could send an apology gift." This was Richard, sounding desperate. "Expensive wine, Chinese tea, something culturally appropriate. Explain that we had a medical emergency, request a reschedule. They'll interpret it as weakness." Jessica cut him off. In Chinese business culture, especially at this level, being unable to handle an unexpected problem signals that you're not a reliable partner. They'll see chaos, not bad luck. What if Gavin speaks directly to Chairman Liang, explains the situation personally? Chairman Liang speaks limited English. His team handles most communication, but for a negotiation this detailed, contract terms, technical specifications, revenue sharing, quality standards, we need professional translation. Otherwise, we're asking him to negotiate in his 3rd or 4th language while we operate in our native one. It's insulting. Amanda stood, gathering her papers with sharp, decisive movements. "Then we're done. We need to start drafting the explanation for the board, figure out which projects we're cutting first. David, start running numbers on the restructuring." "Wait." Gavin hadn't moved from the window. "Just wait. Let me think." But there was nothing to think about, and everyone in the room knew it. The problem had no solution. Marcus was in surgery, no translator was available. The Chinese delegation was probably already on their way from O'Hare Airport. In 2 hours, Chairman Liang and his team would walk into this building expecting professional, culturally appropriate negotiations, and instead they'd find chaos. Nia moved toward the door, her cleaning cart ready. Her shift was almost over. She needed to finish this room, check in with her supervisor, and catch the 4:15 bus that would get her home in time to pick up her kids from after-school care before they started charging late fees she couldn't afford. The trash bag was heavy as she lifted it from the bin. 6 coffee cups, crumpled papers covered in numbers and diagrams, a copy of the Wall Street Journal, someone's half-eaten bagel. She tied off the bag and set it on her cart, reaching for a fresh liner. That's when Gavin exploded. "This is unacceptable." His fist hit the table hard enough to make the water glasses jump. "We have spent 8 months on this deal. 8 months of preparation, negotiation, relationship building. Jessica has been on the phone at 3 in the morning to match Beijing time zones. David has restructured our entire financial forecast around this partnership. Richard has been coordinating logistics for manufacturing integration. And it's going to die. All of it. Everything. Because one person got appendicitis?" He grabbed a water pitcher, refilling his glass with jerky, aggressive movements. Water sloshed over the rim, spilling across his papers, spreading in a clear puddle that soaked into quarterly reports and contract drafts. Perfect. Perfect. Gavin stared at the mess like it represented everything wrong with his day. Then he looked up, his eyes landing on Nia for the first time, really landing on her, seeing her gray uniform and cleaning cart and the trash bag in her hands. And he snapped his fingers. "You, clean this up." Not a request, a command. The tone you'd use for a dog or a piece of equipment. "Clean this up." Nia stood very still. She'd heard that tone before. From managers, from guests, from people who saw the uniform and decided that she existed only as a solution to their minor inconveniences. Usually, she just obeyed. Usually it was easier to wipe up their messes than to push back and risk complaints that could cost her this job she desperately needed. But something about this moment was different. Maybe it was hearing them panic about Mandarin while she stood there invisible. Maybe it was watching $500 million circle the drain while she held the plug. Maybe it was the way Gavin had looked at her, or rather, through her, like she was furniture with hands. Or maybe it was just exhaustion. Exhaustion from being invisible, from staying quiet, from keeping her head down and her mouth shut and her skills hidden because that was what survival required. The room was silent now, everyone watching this minor drama play out. CEO orders Maid to clean up spill. Maid complies. Life continues. Background noise. Unremarkable. Nia set down the trash bag. She walked to the credenza, picked up a stack of clean towels from her cart, and approached the table. The executive shifted slightly, making room, still talking in low voices about exit strategies and damage control. She began soaking up the spilled water, her movements efficient and practiced. The towel darkened as it absorbed liquid, pulling moisture from expensive paper and polished wood. She could feel Gavin's impatience radiating off him, his attention already back on his phone, scrolling through contacts, searching for solutions that didn't exist. All gone because we can't find one person who speaks Mandarin. The words came from Richard, bitter and defeated, and something in Nia just cracked. She straightened up, wet towels still in her hands, and spoke clearly into the anxious silence. I can translate. 5 words. Simple, direct, impossible. The room froze. 6 faces turned toward her with identical expressions of confusion, as if a piece of furniture had suddenly started speaking. For a long moment, nobody responded. They just stared at her gray uniform, her name tag, the cleaning cart behind her, trying to process the disconnect between what they were seeing and what they'd just heard. Then David Wu laughed. Actually laughed. A sharp bark of disbelief. I'm sorry, what? Nia's heart was hammering, but her voice stayed steady. I speak Mandarin. Fluently. I can translate for your meeting. The laughter spread, uncomfortable and dismissive. Richard shook his head, smiling like she'd told a mildly amusing joke. That's okay, thank you, but we need professional translation. This is a very complex business negotiation. I understand. I'm telling you, I can do it. Amanda's expression shifted from amusement to something sharper, more annoyed. Miss, we appreciate the offer, but this isn't a casual conversation. We're talking about highly technical manufacturing contracts, legal terminology, financial projections. This requires certified interpretation skills. I understand that. I'm still telling you I can do it. Gavin finally looked up from his phone, really seeing her for the first time. His eyes moved from her face to her uniform to her name tag, NIA Caldwell, Housekeeping. And his expression went through several rapid changes. Surprise, confusion, skepticism, and then something colder. Calculation. You speak Mandarin. His tone suggested he was humoring her, testing whether she was serious or having some kind of breakdown. Where did you learn? From my mother. She's from Guangzhou. I grew up speaking it at home. I also studied it formally through high school and college, including business Mandarin. You went to college? The question landed like a slap, though he probably hadn't meant it that way. It was just automatic. The assumption that someone in a housekeeping uniform couldn't possibly have education, couldn't possibly have skills beyond operating a vacuum cleaner. Nia's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice level. 2 years at Harper College, I was studying international business before I had to stop. Jessica leaned forward, her expression hovering between interest and deep skepticism. Business Mandarin is different from conversational Mandarin. This negotiation will involve technical vocabulary, manufacturing processes, quality control standards, shipping logistics, intellectual property clauses. Do you know terms like defect rate parameters or non-compete provisions or joint venture equity structures in Mandarin? Qi pen lu chan shu. 经业禁止条款和企业股权结构. Nia delivered the translations without hesitation, her pronunciation crisp and precise. The room went quiet again, but this time the quality of the silence was different. They were actually listening now, reassessing. Richard cleared his throat. Okay, that's impressive. But there's a difference between knowing vocabulary and providing real-time interpretation in a high-pressure business environment. Professional translators train for years. I'm aware. Nia could feel herself pushing into territory that could get her fired, but she was already too far in to back out now. I'm telling you I have the skills you need. You can test me if you don't believe me. Test you. Gavin said it slowly, like he was trying to figure out if this was actually happening. Test the housekeeper to see if she can save our $500 million deal. Yes. This is insane. This from David, who was looking at Gavin like he'd lost his mind. We're seriously considering trusting the biggest negotiation of our lives to someone who was cleaning our trash 10 minutes ago? Amanda's expression had shifted to something more thoughtful. Actually, she paused, glancing at her watch. Actually, what's the alternative? We have 90 minutes before they arrive. We have no translator. We have no backup plan. Either we cancel this meeting and probably lose everything, or we... She looked at Naya, really looked at her. Or we take a chance on something unexpected. Are you out of your mind? David stood up, his voice rising. This is a woman we know nothing about. She could be lying about her skills. She could sabotage the negotiation. She could be our only option. Gavin's voice cut through the argument like a blade. He was studying Nia with new intensity, his business mind clearly running scenarios, calculating risks. All right, let's test her. He pulled out his phone, scrolled through contacts, and hit dial. On the third ring, someone answered, and Gavin switched to speakerphone. Michael, it's Gavin Rourke. Are you still in your office? A man's voice confirmed yes. I need a favor. I'm going to hand the phone to someone, and I need you to speak to her in Mandarin, business level, technical vocabulary, whatever you've got. Then tell me honestly what you think of her skills. Gavin held out the phone to Nia. Michael Chen is our legal counsel's partner. He's originally from Taipei and handles all our international contracts. He's going to test you. Don't make me regret this. Nia took the phone, her hand steady despite her racing pulse. Hello, Mr. Chen. What followed was 5 minutes of rapid-fire Mandarin that would have intimidated most professional translators. Michael Chen didn't go easy on her. He threw out complex legal phrases, manufacturing terminology, financial jargon, idiomatic expressions that didn't translate literally. He switched between simplified and traditional character references, tested her understanding of formal versus casual business register, and even threw in some Cantonese to see if she'd stumble. Nia matched him point for point. She translated his mock contract clauses, explained the difference between Heitong and Qi Yue in legal contexts, caught him when he deliberately used an incorrect phrase about quality standards, and even corrected his tones on 2 words, politely, professionally, but firmly. The executives watched in complete silence, seeing their certainty slowly crumble. When Michael Chen finally spoke in English, his voice carried unmistakable respect. Gavin, where the hell did you find her? Her Mandarin is flawless, native-level fluency, formal business register, perfect cultural context awareness. She even caught my deliberate mistakes, which half my Taiwanese relatives probably wouldn't notice. If you're asking me whether she can handle business translation, the answer is absolutely yes. Who is she? Gavin was staring at Naya like she'd transformed into someone else entirely. We'll talk later, Michael. Thank you. He ended the call and set the phone down slowly. Around the table, the executives were exchanging glances, some stunned, some calculating, some still clearly skeptical. Holy shit, Richard said quietly. She's real. Jessica was already pulling up documents on her tablet. We'd need to brief her on the negotiation points, the deal structure, our boundaries on pricing and terms. She'd need to understand what we're trying to achieve. Can she do that in 90 minutes? David's skepticism hadn't fully evaporated. These are complex concepts we've been developing for months. Amanda looked at Nia. Can you? Nia thought about her mother, working 16-hour shifts at the factory while raising a daughter alone. She thought about her own kids, Marcus, 13, who wanted to be an engineer, and Zoe, 10, who devoured books like oxygen. She thought about every time someone had looked at her uniform and decided she was stupid, incapable, less than. Yes, she said simply. I can. Gavin stood abruptly. Decision made. Richard, call down to the concierge. We need appropriate business attire for... He glanced at Nia. What size are you? What? You can't walk into this meeting in a housekeeping uniform. We need you dressed like you belong in that room, suit, shoes, the whole thing. Richard, make it happen. Amanda, start briefing her on the deal structure. Jessica, pull together all the key documents. David, work out what we're paying her for this. Paying her? David looked confused. She's not doing this for free. Gavin's tone suggested this should be obvious. She's about to spend 2 hours performing skilled labor that could save or sink this company. Figure out fair compensation. No, figure out generous compensation. And have the paperwork ready. He turned back to Nia, and something in his expression had fundamentally shifted. There was still calculation there, still assessment, but also a kind of wary respect. What's your name? Nia Caldwell. Nia, I'm going to be direct with you. This is going to be the hardest 2 hours of your life. These negotiations are brutal even with preparation. Chairman Liang is brilliant and ruthless, and his team will be looking for any weakness. They will test you, push you, try to find angles we haven't covered. You'll be translating complex technical concepts while also reading subtext and cultural nuance. One wrong word, one misunderstood phrase could cost us everything. He paused, letting that sink in. I'm offering you this chance because I'm desperate, and you're apparently qualified. But I need to know, are you absolutely certain you can do this? Because if you can't, if you're even slightly unsure, tell me now. We'll cancel the meeting, take our losses, and figure out plan B. But if you say yes and then fail, you'll have cost a lot of people their jobs, including probably your own. The room was absolutely silent. Everyone was looking at Nia, waiting for her to back down, to admit this was too big, too risky, too far beyond her reach. Nia thought about invisibility, about staying quiet, about all the times she'd bitten her tongue and swallowed her pride and hidden her light because that was what survival required. Then she thought about her mother's voice. Never forget. I can do this, Nia said clearly. I won't let you down. Gavin held her gaze for a long moment, searching for doubt or hesitation. Finding none, he nodded sharply. Then let's get to work. Amanda, start the briefing. Everyone else, we have 87 minutes to turn a housekeeper into a corporate translator. Move. The room exploded into controlled chaos, phones ringing, papers shuffling, voices overlapping as the team shifted from mourning a dead deal to frantically preparing for an impossible rescue. And in the middle of it all, Nia Caldwell stood in her gray housekeeping uniform, about to step into a spotlight she'd never imagined and couldn't afford to fail. The invisible woman was about to become the most important person in the room. The transformation happened in stages, each one stripping away another layer of invisibility. First came the clothes. Richard had dispatched someone from the concierge desk with instructions that bordered on frantic, and 20 minutes later a personal shopper from the Nordstrom 2 blocks away arrived with 3 garment bags and a determined expression. The woman, Teresa, her name tag read, took one look at Nia still standing in her housekeeping uniform and immediately understood the assignment. Conference room bathroom, Teresa said briskly, leading Nia away from the chaos of executives shouting into phones and shuffling papers. We've got maybe 15 minutes to make you look like you've been doing this your whole life. The bathroom was all marble and gold fixtures, the kind of space where even the soap dispensers probably cost more than Nia's monthly rent. Teresa laid out the options with practiced efficiency. Charcoal gray pantsuit, navy blue dress with matching blazer, or black suit with subtle pinstripes. All 3 looked expensive in that quiet, understated way that screamed power rather than wealth. The gray, Nia said immediately. It's authoritative without being aggressive. Navy can read as trying too hard, and black might seem too formal for an afternoon meeting. Teresa's eyebrows rose slightly. You've thought about this. I studied business psychology in college, before I had to stop. Nia was already pulling off her housekeeping uniform, grateful that at least she'd worn decent undergarments today. Corporate dress codes are about signaling competence and belonging. I need to look like I'm part of their world, not a guest in it. The suit fit nearly perfectly. Teresa had a good eye for sizing. Nia had lost weight in the past year, the kind of stress-induced thinning that came from juggling 2 kids, impossible rent, and wages that never quite stretched far enough, but her frame still carried the suit well. The fabric felt foreign against her skin, smooth and structured in a way her usual discount store clothes never managed. Teresa produced a pair of low heels. Nothing too high, you need stability, not height. and a simple watch that probably cost more than Nia's car. This is loaner jewelry from the hotel boutique. They want it back, but for the meeting, you'll look complete. Makeup came next, quick and professional. Foundation to even her skin tone, subtle eyeshadow to make her look alert despite the adrenaline crash she could feel hovering at the edges, lipstick in a shade Teresa called boardroom neutral. When Teresa finally stepped back, Nia barely recognized herself in the mirror. She looked like them, like the executives whose trash she'd been emptying 20 minutes ago, like someone who belonged in rooms where $500 million deals were made. One more thing, Teresa said, pulling Nia's hair back into a low bun that was somehow both elegant and no nonsense. There. Now you look like the most competent woman in that room. Nia's throat was tight. Thank you. Don't thank me. Go save their asses. Teresa grinned. I've worked retail long enough to know when someone's being underestimated. Make them regret it. When Nia walked back into the conference room, the conversation stuttered to a halt. Amanda actually did a double take. Richard's mouth fell open slightly before he caught himself. Even Gavin, who'd been barking orders into his phone, paused mid-sentence. Well, he said slowly, ending his call. That's different. Jessica recovered first, gesturing to the seat next to her at the table. Good. Sit here. We have 63 minutes, and I need to download 8 months of negotiations into your brain. What followed was the most intense crash course Nia had ever experienced. Jessica walked her through the deal structure with military precision. Apex Technologies needed Liang Manufacturing's production capacity and expertise in precision component manufacturing. Liang wanted access to American markets and the prestige of partnering with a major U.S. tech firm. The proposed contract was 5 years, with escalating revenue targets and profit-sharing agreements that got more complex with each year. The core tension, Jessica explained, pulling up spreadsheets that made Nia's eyes water, is around quality control standards and defect liability. We need components that meet aerospace-grade specifications. We're talking tolerances measured in microns. One batch of defective parts could cost us millions in recalls and destroy our reputation. Liang's team wants to cap their liability at 2% of contract value. We need it at 5%. That 3% difference represents about $14 million. Nia absorbed this, her mind already translating key phrases into Mandarin, testing them for cultural nuance. What's their primary concern? Why are they resistant to higher liability? They argue their defect rates are historically well below 1%, so higher liability feels like we don't trust their quality. It's partly about money, but mostly about face. We're essentially saying we don't believe their assurances. So we need to reframe it. Nia was thinking out loud now, drawing on half-remembered business classes and her mother's constant lessons about Chinese cultural values. Not as distrust, but as standard American business practice that has nothing to do with their specific capabilities. Make the liability cap about our board requirements, not about doubting them. Amanda, who'd been listening while managing 3 simultaneous text conversations, looked up sharply. That's actually smart. That could work. David pushed a document across the table toward Nia. Financial projections for years 1 through 5. Revenue sharing starts at 60-40 in our favor, graduating to 55-45 by year 5. They've been pushing for 50-50 by year 3. We can't go below 57-43 or the margins don't work with our existing commitments. The numbers swam before Nia's eyes. Millions of dollars, complex percentage calculations, quarterly payment schedules, adjustment clauses for currency fluctuations, and raw material cost changes. She forced herself to focus, breaking it down into comprehensible chunks. Her community college accounting classes felt like a lifetime ago, but the fundamentals came back: revenue, costs, profit margins, risk allocation. What are they getting out of this besides money? Nia asked. There's always more than money. Gavin, who'd been watching her carefully throughout the briefing, nodded slowly. Market access and reputation. Partnering with Apex gives them credibility with other U.S. manufacturers. It's a reference point they can use to expand their American business significantly. Then that's leverage. If the revenue split becomes a sticking point, we can emphasize the long-term reputational value to them. Make them see beyond the immediate numbers to the strategic positioning. Richard was staring at her like she'd grown a second head. Are you sure you were studying international business and not corporate strategy? International business includes strategy, Naya said quietly. I just never got to finish the degree. A knock on the door interrupted them. One of the hotel's event coordinators stuck her head in, looking harried. Mr. Rourke, the Liang party just contacted our front desk. They're 15 minutes out. They hit lighter traffic than expected. The room went silent. 15 minutes, not the hour they'd thought they had. 15 minutes to finish the briefing, finalize the setup, and somehow convince Chairman Liang that the woman who'd been emptying their trash bins was actually a qualified translator. All right, Gavin's voice cut through the rising panic. Naya, quick summary. Tell me the 3 most important things you need to remember. Nia took a breath, organizing her thoughts. 1. Maintain face for both parties. Never make either side look foolish or incompetent, especially in front of the other. 2. The liability cap issue is about trust, not money. Frame our position as process, not personal. 3. They value long-term relationships over quick deals. Everything we say should emphasize partnership and sustained mutual benefit, not just this contract. 4. Jessica added quickly. Chairman Liang is old-school formal. Titles matter. Age and seniority matter. You address him as Liangdong Shichang at all times, Chairman Liang, never by his first name. His senior VP is Chen Fuzong, Vice President Chen. Get the hierarchy right, or you'll insult them immediately. Understood. Amanda stood up, gathering papers into neat stacks. David, where are we on her compensation? David pulled out a hastily printed contract. We're classifying this as specialized consulting services. $5,000 for the meeting, standard W-9 paperwork, payment processed within 48 hours. If the deal closes successfully, we're adding a 2% success bonus. That's roughly $9 million in total contract value. So we're talking about a $180,000 bonus paid out over the first contract year. Nia's hands went numb. I'm sorry, what? You heard him correctly. Gavin's expression was serious. If you pull this off, you're not getting pocket change. You're getting compensated like the professional you're proving to be. But that only happens if the deal closes. No pressure. The door opened again, and the event coordinator's voice was tight with urgency. They're in the lobby. Chairman Liang's team is heading up now. Time seemed to compress and elongate simultaneously. Suddenly, everyone was moving, straightening chairs, positioning documents, checking phones one last time before silencing them. Jessica pressed a slim folder into Nia's hands containing key contract sections with tabs marking critical pages. Richard did a final sweep of the room, making sure water glasses were filled and the temperature was comfortable. Amanda positioned herself near the door, ready to greet the guests. Gavin pulled Nia aside, his voice low and urgent. Last chance. Are you absolutely certain about this? Nia thought about her mother in that garment factory, invisible to everyone except the quota sheets that measured her productivity. She thought about Marcus, who needed tutoring in calculus that she couldn't afford. She thought about Zoe, whose science fair project had been cobbled together from dollar store supplies because that was all they could manage. She thought about every time someone had looked at her uniform and decided she didn't matter. I'm certain, she said. Then there's one more thing you need to know. Gavin's expression was hard to read. These negotiations can get aggressive. Not in an American way, no shouting or grandstanding, but in subtle ways. They'll test you. They'll throw in obscure references to see if you catch them. They'll use dialect or classical allusions that aren't in textbooks. They'll watch how you handle pressure, confusion, anything unexpected. They're not just evaluating the deal, they're evaluating us, including you. I understand. I hope you do. Because if they sense weakness, if they think we're not taking this seriously, if they conclude we're disorganized or desperate. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The elevator chimed in the hallway outside. Amanda positioned herself at the door, her smile professional and welcoming. Jessica and Richard flanked the table on the left side. David stood near the presentation screen, ready to pull up financial documents. Gavin took his place at the head of the table, the obvious seat of authority. And Naya, in her borrowed suit and loaner watch, stood slightly to the side, visible but not intrusive, professional but not presumptuous. Her heart was hammering so hard she was certain everyone could hear it. The door opened. Chairman Liang entered first, and Nia's cultural training kicked in immediately with a flood of observations. He was in his early 60s, silver-haired and distinguished, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her car. His movements were measured, unhurried. The confidence of someone who knew his time was valuable. Behind him came three others: a woman in her 40s carrying a leather portfolio, a younger man with glasses and an iPad, and an older man who had to be Vice President Chen based on the deference the others showed him. Amanda stepped forward, offering a slight bow, not too deep, which would seem obsequious, but respectful. Chairman Liang, Vice President Chen, welcome to Chicago. We're honored to host you. The woman with the portfolio stepped forward. I am Sarah Wu, Chairman Liang's executive assistant and interpreter. Her English was perfect, her tone professional, but cool. The chairman appreciates your welcome. Nia's stomach dropped. They had brought their own interpreter. Of course they had. Why wouldn't they? She caught Gavin's eye, saw the same realization hitting him. All of this, the transformation, the briefing, the desperate preparation, might be completely unnecessary. But then Chairman Liang spoke, in Mandarin, and Nia's translator instincts engaged before she could think about whether she should. 这个房间比我预期的要小，会议室应该更大、更正式，特别是对于这种规模的谈判。The room is smaller than I expected. The conference room should be larger and more formal, especially for negotiations of this magnitude. Sarah Wu began to translate into English, but Nia was already speaking, her voice calm and clear, also in Mandarin. 梁董事长说得对。我们选择这个私密的空间是想创造一个更适和坦诚对话的氛围，而不是大型商务场和常见的那种形式化环境。我们重视的是实质性讨论的质量，而不是场地的壮观。Chairman Liang is correct. We chose this intimate space deliberately to create an atmosphere more conducive to frank dialogue, rather than the formalized setting typical of large business occasions. We value the quality of substantive discussion over the spectacle of the venue. The room went absolutely silent. Chairman Liang's eyes fixed on Nia with laser focus. Sarah Wu's expression shifted from professional neutrality to something sharper, more alert. Vice President Chen's eyebrows rose. The young man with the iPad actually looked up from his screen. When Chairman Liang spoke again, his voice carried a different quality, testing, probing. 你的中文很流利，你在哪里学的? Your Chinese is very fluent. Where did you learn it? 我母亲是广州人，梁董事长。我从小在双语环境中长大。My mother is from Guangzhou, Chairman Liang. I grew up in a bilingual household. He studied her for a long moment, and Nia could practically see him recalculating, reassessing. Then he said something that made Sarah Wu's expression tighten. 那我们就不需要两个翻译了。Salah, 你可以做笔记。Then we don't need two interpreters. Sarah, you can take notes. It wasn't a request. It was a decision. Chairman Liang had just selected Nia as his preferred translator, bypassing his own employee. Sarah Wu's smile didn't waver, but Nia caught the flash of something in her eyes. Surprise, maybe irritation, definitely a reassessment of the power dynamics in the room. Of course, Chairman Liang. She moved to a seat along the wall, pulling out a notebook. Gavin was staring at Nia with an expression somewhere between shock and cautious hope. Jessica looked like she might pass out from relief. Amanda's professional mask had cracked just enough to show genuine amazement. Please, Gavin said, gesturing to the table. Let's sit. The seating arrangement mattered in ways that would be invisible to most Americans, but glaring to anyone familiar with Chinese business culture. Chairman Liang took the seat at the opposite head of the table from Gavin. Equal positions, mutual respect. Vice President Chen sat to his right, the place of honor. The younger man, introduced as Kevin Zhang, their technical director, sat to the left. Nia positioned herself standing slightly behind and to the right of Gavin, where she could see everyone's faces and hear clearly but wasn't presumptuously seated as an equal participant. It was the correct position for a translator, and she saw Vice President Chen give a small nod of approval at her cultural awareness. Chairman Liang, Gavin began, and Nia translated smoothly, maintaining his tone and intent. We've been looking forward to this meeting for months. We see this partnership as more than a contract. It's an opportunity to build something significant together. Nia rendered it in Mandarin with careful attention to register and respect. 梁董事长，我们期待这次会议已经好几个月了。我们认为这次合作伙伴关系不仅仅是一份合同，这是一个共同建立重要事业的机会。我也是。Chairman Liang responded, his Mandarin formal and measured. 美国公司常说合作伙伴关系，但他们的意思往往是供应商关系。我希望明确这，你们在寻找真正的伙伴关系，还是只是寻找便宜的制造商？ American companies often speak of partnership, but what they mean is often a supplier relationship. I want to be clear. Are you seeking true partnership or merely seeking cheap manufacturing? It was a direct challenge, delivered with the polite formality that made Chinese business negotiations feel like verbal chess. Nia translated it into English without softening the edge. Chairman Liang wants clarity on whether we're seeking a true partnership or simply cheap manufacturing services. Gavin didn't flinch. We're seeking partnership. If we wanted cheap manufacturing, we'd be in Vietnam or Bangladesh. We came to Liang Manufacturing specifically because you're the best at precision component production, and we need the best. Our reputation depends on quality, not cost savings. Nia translated and watched Chairman Liang's expression shift slightly, a small relaxation around his eyes that suggested approval of the direct response. Vice President Chen spoke for the first time, his voice gravelly with age and authority. 质量控制是我们最关心的问题。你们的初稿合同包含的责任条款暗示你们不相信我们的质量保证。Quality control is our primary concern. Your draft contract contains liability clauses that suggest you don't trust our quality assurances. Here it was, the exact issue Jessica had warned about. Nia translated it directly, then watched as Gavin prepared to respond. But before he could speak, Chairman Liang continued, adding something that made the stakes clearer. 我们公司的确陷入低于年俸并 8%， 在行业中是最低的。要求8%的责任上限不是商业管理，这是侮辱。他告诉我们的其他潜在客户，连美国合作伙伴都不相信我们的能力。Our company's defect rate is below 0.8%, the lowest in the industry. Demanding a 5% liability cap is not business practice. It is insult. It tells our other potential clients that even our American partners don't trust our capabilities. The word insult, wuru, carried weight in Chinese business culture that went far beyond its English equivalent. This wasn't just about money or contract terms. This was about reputation, face, the fundamental respect that made business relationships possible. Nia translated carefully, preserving the weight of the concern, and watched Gavin's face as he processed the cultural landmine he'd nearly stepped on. Chairman Liang, Gavin said slowly, and Nia could hear him recalibrating in real time. Please let me be clear. The liability terms in our draft have nothing to do with doubts about your quality. Your defect rates are exactly why we want to work with you. The 5% cap is a requirement from our board of directors and our insurance carriers. American business regulations, not a reflection of our confidence in Liang Manufacturing. Nia translated, but as she spoke, she made a split-second decision to add cultural context that would help land the message. 梁董事长让我明确一点，草案中的责任条款与对您质量的怀疑无关。您的确陷入正是我们想与您合作的原因。85的上限是我们董事会和保险公司的要求，这是美国商业法规，而不是反映我们对两制造的信心。实际上，我们对贵公司能力的信任如此之高，以至于我们愿意公开说明这些条款是形式要求，而不是实质担忧。Chairman Liang, let me be clear. The liability terms in the draft have nothing to do with doubts about your quality. Your defect rates are exactly why we want to work with you. The 5% cap is a requirement from our board and insurance carriers. American business regulations, not a reflection of our confidence in Liang Manufacturing. In fact, our trust in your company's capabilities is so high that we're willing to state publicly. These terms are formal requirements, not substantive concerns. It was a slight expansion of what Gavin had said, but it accomplished something crucial. It gave Chairman Liang the explicit assurance of respect that Chinese business culture required. Nia was gambling that Gavin would understand and approve of the addition. Chairman Liang studied Gavin for a long moment, then asked a question in Mandarin that sounded casual but wasn't. 你的翻译很有技巧，他理解我们的文化。这是你们公司的标准做法，还是今天的特殊情况？ Your translator is very skilled. She understands our culture. Is this standard practice for your company or a special circumstance today? The question was a test, and Nia knew it. Chairman Liang was asking, in a polite way, whether Apex Technologies genuinely understood cross-cultural business or whether they'd just gotten lucky with their translator choice today. Nia translated the question directly, watching Gavin's face as he processed the subtext. He glanced at her, and something passed between them, an understanding maybe, or a mutual recognition that they were both making this up as they went along. Special circumstance, Gavin said honestly. Our regular translator had a medical emergency this morning. We were fortunate to discover that Ms. Caldwell has exactly the skills we needed. Sometimes the best solutions come from unexpected places. When Nia translated this, she kept Gavin's honesty but framed it slightly differently. 特殊情况。我们的常规翻译今天早上发生了医疗紧急情况。我们很幸运地发现考德维尔女是正好具备我们需要的技能。有时候，最好的解决方案来自意想不到的地方。这也许说明我们愿意灵活应对，不拘泥于传统方法。Special circumstance. Our regular translator had a medical emergency this morning. We were fortunate to discover that Ms. Caldwell has exactly the skills we needed. Sometimes the best solutions come from unexpected places, which perhaps demonstrates our willingness to adapt flexibly and not be constrained by traditional methods. She'd added the last part deliberately, turning a potential weakness, we had to scramble for a translator, into a subtle strength. We're flexible and innovative when facing challenges. Chairman Liang's expression shifted again, and this time when he spoke, his tone carried a hint of warmth that hadn't been there before. 灵活性在商业中很重要。刚性的公司在遇到意外时就会崩溃。也许这是个好兆头。Flexibility is important in business. Rigid companies collapse when facing the unexpected. Perhaps this is a good omen. Chairman Liang says flexibility is important in business, Nia translated. Rigid companies collapse when facing the unexpected. He suggests this might be a good omen. Gavin smiled, and Nia could see some of the tension leaving his shoulders. I hope so. Shall we discuss the specific terms? What followed was 2 hours of the most intense, intricate negotiations Nia had ever witnessed or imagined. They moved through the contract section by section, with David pulling up financial models on the screen, Jessica referencing legal precedents, and Richard addressing technical manufacturing specifications. Every statement had to be translated, every question rendered across the language barrier, every nuance preserved. But it wasn't just about words. Nia found herself doing something more complex than simple translation. She was navigating between two different business cultures, two different communication styles, two different sets of assumptions about how negotiations should work. When Vice President Chen made an oblique reference to a classical Chinese proverb about mutual benefit, Nia didn't just translate the words, she explained the cultural context so that Gavin understood the deeper meaning. When Gavin used an American sports metaphor about moving the goalposts, Nia rendered it in a way that would make sense to Chinese businessmen who'd never watched American football. She caught Kevin Zhang making a technical point about tolerance specifications that Sarah Wu, taking notes in the corner, seemed to misunderstand slightly. Nia gently clarified in both languages, earning a grateful nod from Kevin and a sharp look from Sarah. The liability clause issue came up again, and this time Nia found herself actively helping to broker a solution. When Chairman Liang proposed a sliding scale, starting at 3% and escalating to 5% only if defect rates exceeded certain thresholds, Nia didn't just translate. She helped frame it in terms that would work for both sides, suggesting specific language that preserved face for Liang Manufacturing while meeting Apex's insurance requirements. What if we structured it as a quality incentive rather than a liability penalty? She offered quietly to Gavin during a brief pause. Start at 4%, drop to 3% if they maintain below 0.5% defect rates for 2 consecutive quarters. That way it's positioned as rewarding excellence rather than punishing problems. Gavin stared at her. That's actually brilliant. That could work. When they presented this structure to Chairman Liang, Nia made sure to frame it in Mandarin as a recognition of excellence. 这个结构承认两制造的卓越质量标准，它不是惩罚性的，它是奖励性的，承认你们已经达到的高标准。This structure acknowledges Liang Manufacturing's excellent quality standards. It's not punitive. It's rewarding, recognizing the high standards you've already achieved. Chairman Liang conferred quietly with Vice President Chen, and Nia caught fragments of their conversation, something about reasonable approach and saves face. When he turned back, his expression had softened further. 这是可以接受的。我们继续. This is acceptable. Let us continue. The clock on the wall ticked past 4:30, then 5:03. The afternoon light through the windows shifted from bright to golden to amber. Nia's feet were starting to hurt in the borrowed heels. Her throat was dry from constant speaking, and her brain felt like it was operating at 200% capacity just to keep up. But something else was happening too. With each successfully navigated point, each cultural bridge she helped build, the dynamic in the room was shifting. Chairman Liang had started directing more of his comments specifically to her, treating her not just as a conduit, but as a participant. Gavin was checking with her before responding to complex points, trusting her judgment on cultural nuance. Even Sarah Wu had stopped taking notes and was watching Nia with an expression that had evolved from irritation to something closer to professional respect. They were approaching the revenue-sharing structure, the most contentious point, when Chairman Liang asked for a 10-minute break. Everyone stood, stretching, and Kevin Zhang approached Nia directly. 请问你在哪里学的商务中文？你的用词选择非常精确。Excuse me, where did you learn business Chinese? Your word choice is very precise. Nia smiled, grateful for the moment of normal conversation. 我母亲从小就坚持我学习正式的中文。我也在大学学习了国际商务，虽然我没能完成学位。My mother insisted I learn formal Chinese from childhood. I also studied international business in college, though I wasn't able to complete my degree. 那很遗憾，你显然有这方面的天赋。That's unfortunate. You clearly have a talent for it. 谢谢。今天对我来说也是学习经验。Thank you. Today is a learning experience for me as well. Gavin appeared at her elbow, his voice low. You're doing phenomenally, seriously. I don't know what I expected, but you're exceeding it by miles. We're not done yet, Nia said quietly. The revenue split is going to be the hardest part. I know. Any insights? Nia glanced over at where Chairman Liang was conferring with his team. He's not going to budge much on the percentages. It's about principle more than actual dollars at this point. But I think there might be flexibility on the timeline. If we can offer them a faster path to the higher percentage, even if the numbers themselves stay where we need them, that might be enough. It lets them tell their board they negotiated a quicker transition to more favorable terms. Gavin studied her. You know, when you walked in here in a housekeeping uniform this afternoon, if someone had told me you'd be giving me negotiation strategy advice by 5 p.m., I would have thought they were insane. Welcome to my entire day, Nia said, and despite everything, the pressure, the exhaustion, the impossible nature of what she was doing, she felt herself smile. The break ended, and they reconvened. Gavin opened the revenue discussion with the exact strategy Nia had suggested, and she watched Chairman Liang's expression shift as he processed the proposal. The conversation that followed was delicate, intense, full of careful phrasing and cultural navigation. But by 5:45, they had an agreement, 60-40 for year 1, 58-42 for year 2, 55-45 by year 4. With specific performance metrics that could accelerate the transition if both parties hit their targets. wo ren wei woman yu jichu. I think we have a foundation. Chairman Liang's words were measured, but Nia caught the satisfaction in his tone. Yes, Gavin agreed once Nia had translated. I think we do. What remained were technical details, implementation timelines, and legal refinements that would require more meetings and formal documentation. But the core deal was there, shaped and solid, and everyone in the room knew it. Chairman Liang stood, and everyone else rose with him. He spoke directly to Gavin, his tone formal but genuine. 这是一次富有成效的会议，你的团队准备充分，你的翻译非常出色，我期待着我们的合作。This has been a productive meeting. Your team is well prepared, and your translator is exceptional. I look forward to our partnership. Then he turned to Nia, switching to English for the first time, his accent heavy but his meaning clear. Thank you, Ms. Caldwell. You did more than translate. You built bridges. That is rare skill. Nia's throat went tight. 谢谢您，梁董事长，这是我的荣幸. Thank you, Chairman Liang. It was my honor. As the Chinese delegation prepared to leave, Sarah Wu approached Nia quietly. Her expression was carefully neutral, but her words carried genuine professional respect. Where did you train? Your business Mandarin is better than some professional interpreters I've worked with. Self-taught mostly, Nia admitted. My mother and community college classes. Sarah's eyebrows rose. Seriously? Seriously. Then you're wasted in whatever you were doing before today. Sarah pulled out a business card. If you ever decide to do this professionally, call me. I know people who are always looking for quality translators. After they left, the conference room erupted in celebration. Jessica actually hugged Nia. Richard was already on the phone with the legal team, getting formal contract drafting started. David was pulling up the compensation paperwork. Amanda was updating the board via email, her fingers flying across her phone. And Gavin just stood there, watching Nia, his expression complex and unreadable. We need to talk, he said quietly, and Nia's stomach dropped, because she suddenly remembered she was still technically a hotel housekeeper who'd abandoned her shift to do this. Her supervisor probably had no idea where she was. She might have already been fired. But Gavin's next words weren't what she expected. That was the most impressive performance I've ever seen in a business negotiation. You didn't just translate. You strategized. You problem-solved. You built rapport. You saved this company hundreds of millions of dollars. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. I need to know something. What the hell are you doing cleaning hotel rooms? The question hung in the air between them, sharp and unavoidable. Nia looked at Gavin Rourke. This man who 4 hours ago had snapped his fingers at her like she was furniture, who now stood waiting for an answer that would require her to explain a decade of impossible choices and dead dreams. Life happened, she said finally, her voice steady despite the exhaustion creeping through her bones. I had to leave college when my mother got sick. Lung disease from 20 years working in textile factories. Someone had to pay for her care, and student loans don't pause for medical emergencies. Hotel housekeeping offered health benefits and steady hours that let me be home when my kids got out of school. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. Gavin's expression shifted through several emotions too quickly to name. Your mother, is she? She died 3 years ago. Nia said it matter-of-factly, the way you learn to discuss grief when you can't afford to fall apart. The health benefits helped, but ultimately it wasn't enough. Nothing was enough. The conference room had gone quiet. Jessica had stopped typing on her phone. Richard had ended his call. Even David, who'd been buried in spreadsheets, was listening now. They were all hearing, probably for the first time, that the woman who'd just saved their company had her own story, one that involved loss and struggle and the kind of daily survival they'd never had to calculate. Amanda broke the silence, her voice gentle. Your kids, how old are they? 13 and 10, Marcus and Zoe. Saying their names out loud in this context felt strange, like two worlds colliding that were never supposed to touch. Marcus wants to be an engineer. Zoe's obsessed with marine biology. They're both brilliant, but she stopped herself because finishing that sentence meant admitting things she barely admitted to herself in the dark hours before dawn. But what? Jessica asked quietly. But brilliance costs money. Tutoring, enrichment programs, college applications. None of it's free. Marcus needs calculus help I can't afford to hire. Zoe wants to go to science camp next summer, but it costs $1,200. They both need so many things I can't give them, and I lie awake at night doing math that never works out, trying to figure out how to make their dreams possible on housekeeping wages. The words were spilling out now, months of suppressed frustration finding an unexpected outlet. So yes, I have a college education and fluent Mandarin, and apparently I'm good at high-level business negotiations, but none of that matters when you're a single mother with 2 kids and medical debt and rent that keeps increasing while wages stay flat. You take the job that keeps the lights on, and you swallow your pride, and you tell yourself maybe someday things will be different. The silence that followed was heavy with the kind of awareness that changes people, if they're willing to be changed. Nia watched it dawn on their faces. These executives who probably spent more on lunch than she made in a week, that the woman standing before them in a borrowed suit had been invisible to them, not because she lacked worth, but because they'd never bothered to look. Gavin cleared his throat roughly. David, what's the compensation package we discussed? David shuffled papers, clearly uncomfortable with the emotional turn the conversation had taken. $5,000 for today's work, plus the $180,000 success bonus paid out over the first contract year, contingent on the deal closing successfully. Change it. Gavin's voice was firm. Make the success bonus $250,000 and pay it out in full within 90 days of contract signing instead of over a year. And I want her hired as a full-time employee, not a contractor. Richard's eyebrows shot up. Gavin, we don't have a position, then create one. Gavin was still looking at Nia, his expression intense and determined. We've been talking about expanding our international business development. We need someone who can handle cross-cultural negotiations, someone who understands both the language and the strategy. Nia just proved she can do both at the highest level. You're offering me a job. Nia's voice came out flat, disbelieving. Her brain felt like it was trying to process information in a language she didn't quite speak. I'm offering you a career. Director of International Relations. Salary $120,000 to start. Full benefits, 401k matching, the whole package. Your job would be handling our partnerships with foreign manufacturers, starting with serving as the primary liaison for the Liang contract. You'd work with Jessica's team, travel occasionally, all expenses covered, and basically do what you did today, but for every international negotiation we handle. The numbers weren't making sense. Nia had made $32,000 last year cleaning hotel rooms. Gavin was offering nearly 4 times that, plus a bonus that represented more money than she'd earned in the last 7 years combined. It felt like a hallucination, like any second she'd wake up in her uniform with a supervisor yelling at her for abandoning her shift. I don't have a college degree, she said, grasping for objections because the alternative was believing this was real. I never finished. You have something better than a degree. You have demonstrable skills and real-world results. I just watched you navigate a negotiation that business school graduates would have botched. Gavin's conviction was absolute. If you want to finish your degree, we'll pay for it. Tuition reimbursement is part of the benefits package. But I'm not hiring you for credentials on paper. I'm hiring you because you're exceptional at something we desperately need. Jessica stepped forward, her earlier panic replaced with excited energy. Nia, he's right. Do you have any idea how rare your skill set is? Fluent business Mandarin, cultural intelligence, strategic thinking, ability to work under pressure. Companies pay recruiters 6 figures just to find people with half those qualifications. You've been hiding in plain sight. I wasn't hiding, I was surviving. But even as Nia said it, she felt something shifting inside her, some foundation that had been cracked and shored up and barely holding for years suddenly feeling like it might, maybe, be solid again. Amanda pulled out her phone, fingers already flying across the screen. I'm texting HR to draft the employment paperwork. We'll need background checks and references, standard onboarding, but we can expedite everything. When can you start? Nia's thoughts were spinning. I have a job. I can't just abandon my shift. My supervisor is probably already furious. I might be fired. You are fired, said a new voice from the doorway, and everyone turned to see Margaret Torres, The Meridian Grand's head of housekeeping, standing with her arms crossed and an expression that could cut glass. You abandoned your station without permission, missed your sign out, and apparently spent the last 4 hours doing something other than your assigned duties. That's grounds for immediate termination. Nia's heart sank. She'd known this was coming, but hearing it made it real. Margaret, I can explain. I don't want explanations. I want reliability. You know how many complaints I've fielded today about uncleaned rooms because you disappeared? Margaret's voice was sharp with the particular anger of someone whose own job had been made harder by someone else's choices. Security footage shows you going into this conference room at 3 p.m. It's now past 6. You want to tell me what's been so important that you felt entitled to ignore your responsibilities? Gavin stepped forward, his corporate authority snapping into place. Ms. Torres, I'm Gavin Rourke, CEO of Apex Technologies. Ms. Caldwell wasn't abandoning her duties. She was responding to an emergency request from our company. We had a critical business situation that required immediate translation services, and she provided them at our explicit request. Margaret's expression didn't soften. Then you should have gone through proper channels, made a request through hotel management, not pulled one of my employees off the floor without authorization. You're absolutely right, and I apologize for that. Gavin's tone was conciliatory but firm. The situation was urgent, and we didn't follow proper protocol. That's on us, not on Ms. Caldwell. However, I should inform you that I've just offered Ms. Caldwell a position with Apex Technologies. She'll be resigning from the Meridian Grand effective immediately. Margaret's eyes narrowed. Convenient. She gets caught neglecting her job, and suddenly she's got a better offer. How many times have I heard that excuse? It's not an excuse. Richard stepped forward with his tablet, pulling up the contract draft. Look, here's the employment agreement we're preparing. Director of International Relations, 6-figure salary. This is legitimate. Margaret glanced at the screen, her skepticism wavering slightly, but her voice remained hard. Good for her. She still violated hotel policy, and I still have a job to do. She's terminated, effective now. She can pick up her final paycheck from HR tomorrow. Wait. Nia found her voice, pushing past the surreal feeling of watching her old life and potential new life collide in the worst possible way. Margaret, I understand you're angry. I would be too, but please understand, this wasn't about disrespecting you or the job. This was about survival. They were offering me a chance to change my children's entire future. What was I supposed to do? Say no and go back to emptying trash bins? You were supposed to do your job, the job you were being paid for. But something in Margaret's voice had shifted slightly, the anger mixing with something more complex. You think you're the only single mother working here? You think you're the only one with kids who need things and dreams that cost money? Half my staff is in the same situation, and they all show up and do their work without deciding they're too good for it. The accusation stung because it contained a kernel of truth. Nia had spent years resenting her circumstances, feeling like she deserved better, like her education and skills were being wasted. She'd looked down at the work even as she did it competently, and probably some of that had shown through in ways she hadn't realized. You're right, Nia said quietly. I'm not the only one struggling, and I should have found a way to handle this differently. But Margaret, if one of your staff members had a chance to escape this, to actually use their education, to earn enough to stop choosing between rent and groceries, would you really want them to say no out of loyalty to a job that barely pays them enough to survive? Margaret was silent for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she sighed, some of the anger draining away to reveal the exhaustion underneath. No, I wouldn't. I'd want them to run like hell and never look back. She glanced at Gavin. But she still violated policy, and I still have to enforce consequences. She's terminated. What you do with her after that is your business. Understood. Gavin nodded, then looked at Nia. Consider this your 2-week notice period then. Except you're not working it. Apex is paying you for those 2 weeks while we process your onboarding. Margaret, we'll compensate the hotel for any inconvenience caused by Ms. Caldwell's sudden departure. Would $2,000 cover the disruption? Margaret blinked, clearly not having expected that. Yes, that would more than cover it. Consider it done. We'll have our accounting department contact your management. Gavin turned to David. Make that happen. After Margaret left, still looking confused but marginally less furious, the conference room settled into an odd mixture of celebration and shell shock. Jessica was already planning Nia's onboarding schedule. Richard was discussing travel logistics for future meetings with Liang Manufacturing. Amanda was fielding calls from board members who'd heard the deal was back on track and wanted details. And Nia stood in the middle of it all, still wearing borrowed clothes, still processing the fact that her life had fundamentally changed in the space of 4 hours. She glanced at the clock, 6:15 p.m. Her kids would be in after-school care, probably wondering why she hadn't picked them up yet. The coordinator would be adding late fees to her account, $5 for every 15 minutes past 6 p.m. I need to call my kids, she said abruptly, cutting through the planning chatter. They're waiting for me. The room went quiet again, everyone suddenly remembering that Nia had an entire existence outside this conference room, one that included responsibilities that couldn't be delayed or rescheduled. Gavin pulled out his phone. What's the number for their school? I can call. What's the number? His tone made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. Nia recited the number for Brightside After School Care, and Gavin dialed, putting the call on speaker. When the coordinator answered, he launched into an explanation that was both authoritative and apologetic. Mshaz. Caldwell had been detained at an emergency work meeting. He was personally ensuring she'd be there within the hour, and Apex Technologies would be covering all late fees, plus an additional donation to the after-school program for the inconvenience. How much of a donation? The coordinator asked, clearly suspicious of corporate promises. $1,000? You'll have the check by Friday. Gavin didn't even hesitate. After he hung up, Nia just stared at him. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. You were here because we needed you, which means your kids waiting longer is our responsibility. He glanced at Richard. Get a car service to take her to pick up her children, then home. Bill it to the company. I can take the bus. Not tonight, you can't. Tonight you're our employee, and our employees don't take the bus home after pulling off miracles. Gavin's tone softened slightly. Nia, I know this is overwhelming. I know it's happening too fast, but I need you to understand something. What happened today wasn't luck or charity. You earned this, every single part of it. Jessica appeared at Nia's elbow with a garment bag. The suit is yours. Teresa from the boutique said to consider it a gift. The shoes and watch need to go back, but we'll get you your own as part of the wardrobe allowance for the position. Wardrobe allowance? For client meetings and negotiations. It's standard for executive positions. Jessica said it like it was obvious, like everyone just automatically had money allocated for buying professional clothes. We'll get you set up with a corporate card and an office. You'll be on the same floor as me, probably down the hall from international development. An office. Nia tried to picture it. Her own space, her own desk, her name on the door maybe. The last time she'd had a workspace that was actually hers was a study carrel at community college, and even that had been shared with 2 other students. Amanda handed her a folder. Preliminary paperwork. Take it home, read through everything tonight. We'll need your signature tomorrow, but I want you to actually review it first. If anything seems off or you have questions, call me directly. She tucked her business card into the folder. My cell number is on there. I mean it. Call if you need to. David was more businesslike, handing over the compensation agreement with highlighted sections. The signing bonus gets paid within 48 hours. That's $5,000 in your account by Friday. The success bonus is contingent on the Liang deal finalizing, but based on what happened today, I'd say that's practically guaranteed. We're looking at contract execution within 3 weeks, which means you'd see that $250,000 by mid-January. The numbers still didn't feel real. Nia looked at the paper with her name on it, the salary figure, the benefits description, and her brain kept insisting this was some kind of elaborate prank or mistake or fever dream. What if I'm not good enough? The question slipped out before she could stop it, vulnerability she hadn't meant to show cracking through her composure. What if today was a fluke? What if I mess up the next negotiation? Gavin met her eyes directly. Then you'll learn from it and do better the next time. That's how jobs work, Nia. Even executive positions. We're not expecting perfection. We're expecting competence, effort, and the kind of creative problem solving you demonstrated today. If you're worried about being out of your depth, don't be. I've seen Harvard MBAs with worse instincts than you showed in that meeting. But they had degrees and training, and you had actual life experience, cultural knowledge they'd never access, and the kind of strategic thinking that can't be taught in a classroom. He cut off her objection firmly, but not unkindly. I'm not saying you won't have a learning curve. International relations work is complex and demanding, but I've been doing this for 20 years, and I can recognize raw talent when I see it. You have it. The question is whether you're willing to trust that. The car service Richard had called arrived, a black sedan that was nicer than any vehicle Nia had ever been inside. The driver waited patiently while she gathered her things, said hurried goodbyes to the executives who'd gone from ignoring her to celebrating her in the span of one impossible afternoon. Jessica walked her to the elevator. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Come to Apex headquarters. The address is in the folder. We'll start your onboarding, get you set up with IT and security, do the official paperwork. Dress professionally, but you don't need to go overboard. We're a tech company, not a law firm. Nia stopped, embarrassed. I don't have professional clothes, not really. The suit is borrowed and my regular wardrobe is basically jeans and housekeeping uniforms. Jessica didn't miss a beat. Then we're going shopping tomorrow afternoon. Company credit card, my treat. Consider it part of the onboarding process. The elevator arrived and Nia stepped in, still feeling like she was moving through a dream. As the doors started to close, Jessica stuck her hand out to stop them one more time. Nia, for what it's worth, I'm really glad you spoke up today. A lot of people in your position would have stayed quiet, stayed invisible. It took guts to step forward, she smiled. Welcome to Apex. The drive to Brightside after school care took 20 minutes through Chicago traffic. Nia sat in the back seat of the sedan, watching the city slide past the windows, trying to process everything that had happened. Her phone had 7 missed calls, 3 from the after-school program, 2 from her friend Tanya, who usually gave her rides when the bus schedule didn't work out, and 2 from numbers she didn't recognize that were probably from the hotel HR department. She called Tanya first because Tanya had known her since Marcus was born, had been there through her mother's illness and death, had loaned her money more times than either of them counted anymore. Girl, where have you been? Tanya's voice was worried and exasperated in equal measure. I called the hotel and they said you'd been terminated. What happened? Nia took a breath. I got a new job. Today? You got fired and hired on the same day? It's complicated. Can I come over later, after I get the kids settled? I need to tell you in person because you're not going to believe it otherwise. Now, I'm really worried. You're okay, right? The kids are okay? We're more than okay, I promise. I need time to process before I can explain. Tanya was quiet for a moment. All right, come by whenever. I'll have wine ready. You sound like you need wine. I really do. When the sedan pulled up at Brightside, Nia saw Marcus and Zoe sitting on the bench outside with Mrs. Patterson, the evening coordinator. Her kids looked worried. Marcus had his protective big brother expression on, the one that made him look older than 13, and Zoe was chewing her thumbnail, a nervous habit she'd developed after Nia's mother died. The moment they saw her, both kids jumped up and ran over. Nia met them halfway, pulling them both into a hug that was probably tighter than necessary. Mom, what happened? Marcus's voice cracked slightly, hovering between childhood and adolescence. Mrs. Patterson said you were at work, but you couldn't leave. Are you in trouble? Were you fired? Zoe asked, her voice small and scared. Sasha's mom got fired last month and they had to move apartments. No, well, yes, but Nia pulled back to look at their faces, these two humans she'd built her entire life around protecting. It's complicated, but the short version is, I got a new job. A much better job. Marcus's eyes narrowed with teenage skepticism. How much better? Better enough that we're going to be okay. More than okay. Nia felt tears pricking at her eyes and blinked them back hard. Better enough that you can get that calculus tutor we've been talking about. And Zoe, that science camp next summer, we can afford it now. Zoe's eyes went wide. Really? The marine biology one at the university? Really? Mom, what kind of job is this? Marcus was still skeptical. His 13-year-old brain trained by years of disappointment and close calls not to trust promises that sounded too good. Because last week you said we couldn't afford new shoes, and now you're talking about camp and tutors. Nia crouched down so she was eye level with both of them. I know it sounds crazy. It sounds crazy to me too. But today I got to use my Chinese skills. Remember how Grandma always made me practice? And I helped some business people with a really important meeting. They were so impressed they offered me a real job, with a real salary that's going to change things for us. How much? Marcus asked bluntly, because he'd been tracking their household finances since he was 11, had seen the bills she tried to hide, had heard her crying at 2 a.m. when she thought he was asleep. Nia hesitated, then decided he deserved the truth. $120,000 a year, plus a one-time bonus that's even more than that. Marcus went absolutely still. Zoe looked confused, trying to calculate whether that number was actually good. Finally, Marcus said very quietly, "That's not real." "It is. I have the paperwork in this folder." She held up the documents Amanda had given her. "I start tomorrow." "Mom." Marcus's voice cracked completely this time, and suddenly he wasn't a skeptical teenager anymore, just a kid who'd been scared for a very long time. "Are you serious? We're really going to be okay? We're really going to be okay." Zoe launched herself at Nia, wrapping her arms around her mother's neck with enough force to nearly knock her over. Marcus joined a second later, and they stood there in the parking lot of Brightside After-School Care. 3 people who'd been holding their breath for years, finally allowing themselves to believe that maybe, possibly, things were actually going to change. Mrs. Patterson approached with paperwork for Nia to sign, acknowledging the late pickup. "The gentleman who called said his company was covering the fees?" "Yes, they'll send a check." Nia signed the form, still half expecting someone to appear and tell her this was all a mistake. "And the donation?" "That too. $1,000 for the program." Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows shot up. That's very generous. We could replace the art supplies and fix the broken computers in the reading room with that kind of funding." "Then I'm glad something good came from me being late." Nia gathered her kids and their backpacks, steering them toward the sedan that was still waiting at the curb. Marcus stopped dead when he saw the car. "We're riding in that?" "Just tonight. It's a company car service." "Your new company has car services?" Zoe was practically vibrating with excitement. "Mom, what kind of job is this?" "The kind I didn't know I could have," Nia said honestly. "Come on, let's go home." The driver helped load their backpacks, and the kids climbed into the sedan with wide eyes, taking in the leather seats and the bottle of water in the center console and the way their mother was being treated like someone important. Nia gave the driver their address, a 3-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood that wasn't great but wasn't terrible, the best she'd been able to afford on housekeeping wages. As they drove, Marcus pulled out his phone and started Googling. Apex Technologies. They make industrial automation systems. They're worth like $800 million. He looked up at Nia with something close to awe. "Mom, you're working for a major corporation." "I guess I am." "What's your job title?" "Director of International Relations." "Director?" Marcus stared at his phone screen, presumably looking up what that meant. "Mom, that's like upper management. People with that title have people working under them. You're going to be somebody's boss." The thought hadn't even occurred to Nia. She'd been so focused on the salary and the impossibility of the opportunity that she hadn't considered the actual scope of the position. Director meant responsibility, authority, people depending on her decisions. It meant being visible in a completely new way, not as support staff to be ignored, but as leadership to be heard. "I think I'm going to throw up," she said, only half joking. Zoe patted her arm comfortingly. "You'll be a good boss, Mama. You're nice to people, not like Mr. Henderson at school who yells all the time." "Being nice isn't the same as being effective," Marcus said, his practicality surfacing again. "You're going to need to figure out how to be in charge, how to make decisions, how to—" "Marcus," Nia cut him off gently. "I know. But tonight, can we just be happy about this? I'll figure out the rest tomorrow." They pulled up at the apartment building, and the driver helped carry their bags to the entrance. Nia tipped him $20, probably too much, but she was still floating on the unreality of everything, and led her kids up 3 flights of stairs to their apartment. Home looked the same as it had this morning when she'd left for her shift at the Meridian Grand. The living room with its second-hand couch and yard sale coffee table, the kitchen with the refrigerator that made concerning noises, the bedroom she shared with Zoe while Marcus had the smaller second bedroom. But somehow everything felt different, like she was seeing it through new eyes, the eyes of someone who might not have to live like this much longer. She made dinner while the kids did homework. Nothing fancy, just spaghetti with jarred sauce and bagged salad, but it was food, and they were together, and that had always been enough before. Except now enough was shifting, expanding, becoming something she barely dared to imagine. After dinner, after Marcus retreated to his room to game online with friends, and Zoe settled in with a book about dolphins, Nia sat at their tiny kitchen table and spread out the paperwork from Apex. The employment agreement, the benefits documentation, the compensation structure, all of it official and real and terrifying. She read every word twice, looking for catches or clauses that would reveal this as too good to be true. But the language was straightforward, the terms were clear, and her name was right there in the signature block, waiting for her to make this permanent. Her phone buzzed, a text from Tanya. "Still coming over? I've got the wine open." Nia glanced at the clock. 8:30 p.m. The kids were settled, and she needed to talk to someone who'd understand the sheer impossibility of what had happened. "Marcus, I'm going to Tanya's for an hour. You're in charge." Her son appeared in his doorway, giving her his most mature look. "I know, Mom. I'm 13, not 6. We'll be fine." "I know you will." But she still double-checked that Zoe had brushed her teeth and that both doors were locked before she left. Tanya lived 2 floors down and 3 apartments over, close enough that Nia had never worried about leaving the kids alone for short stretches. When Tanya opened the door, she took one look at Nia's face and immediately pulled her into the apartment. "Okay, talk. Because you look like you've seen things today that fundamentally altered your understanding of reality." Nia laughed, slightly hysterical. "That's actually a perfect description." She told the whole story, starting with the overheard panic in conference room 47B, and ending with Marcus Googling her new company while sitting in a car service sedan. Tanya listened without interrupting, her expression cycling through disbelief, joy, concern, and back to disbelief. When Nia finished, Tanya was quiet for a long moment. Then she refilled both their wine glasses and raised hers in a toast. To stepping out of the shadows, to using skills you've been hiding for way too long, and to never, ever emptying another rich person's trash can. They clinked glasses, and Nia felt something loosening in her chest, the beginning of allowing herself to believe this was actually happening, that her life was actually changing, that maybe invisible women could become visible after all. But even as she celebrated with her best friend, part of Nia's mind was already spinning forward to tomorrow, to walking into Apex Technologies as an employee rather than a miracle, to proving that today wasn't a fluke, to facing whatever came next with the same determination that had made her speak up when every instinct screamed to stay silent. She'd been invisible for so long that visibility felt dangerous, exposing, like standing in a spotlight that could reveal all the ways she didn't belong. But she'd taken the first step already. She'd said, "I can translate," into a room full of people who'd never seen her before. Now she just had to figure out how to keep standing in that light without burning up. Nia didn't sleep that night. She lay in the bed she shared with Zoe, listening to her daughter's soft breathing and staring at the ceiling where a water stain from last winter's leak spread like a map of somewhere she'd never been. Her mind wouldn't stop replaying the day, analyzing every moment, searching for the inevitable catch that would reveal this as temporary or conditional or somehow not real. At 3 a.m., she gave up on sleep entirely and moved to the kitchen, making coffee she didn't need and reading through the employment paperwork for the 4th time. The words remained unchanged: salary, benefits, start date, her name in the signature block. She traced her finger over that line, this space where her signature would make everything official, and felt the weight of what she was about to do. This wasn't just changing jobs. This was stepping into a completely different life, one where she'd be visible in ways she'd spent years avoiding. One where people would expect things from her, rely on her judgment, hold her accountable for decisions that affected millions of dollars. The responsibility felt enormous, crushing, impossible. But then she thought about Marcus researching calculus tutors on his phone after dinner, his face lit with hope she hadn't seen in years. She thought about Zoe's excitement over science camp, the way she'd already started planning what marine animals she wanted to study. She thought about her mother's voice, "Never forget," and realized that staying invisible hadn't honored her mother's sacrifices. It had wasted them. By 5 a.m., she was showered and trying to figure out what to wear from her limited wardrobe. The borrowed suit from yesterday was hanging in her closet, but Jessica had said not to go overboard, that Apex was a tech company. Nia settled on her best pair of black pants, a little worn but still presentable, and a teal blouse she'd bought on clearance 2 years ago. It wasn't executive wear, but it was professional enough for a first day before the shopping trip Jessica had mentioned. Marcus emerged from his room at 6:30, looking surprised to find his mother already dressed and making breakfast. "You're up early?" "First day." Nia cracked eggs into a pan, grateful for something to do with her hands. "I wanted to be ready." "You nervous?" "Terrified." Her honesty seemed to reassure him somehow. He poured himself orange juice and sat at the table, watching her cook with that analytical expression he got when he was processing something complicated. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Always." "What if they realize they made a mistake? What if you get there and they decide you're not actually qualified?" Nia flipped the eggs carefully, buying time to formulate an answer. "Then I'll have tried and failed, which is still better than never trying at all." "But Marcus, here's what I've learned. People like us, we're so used to being told we're not enough that we start believing it. We convince ourselves we don't belong in certain spaces before anyone else gets the chance to tell us that. I've been doing that for years, making myself invisible because I was scared of being seen and rejected." She slid the eggs onto plates, added toast, brought breakfast to the table. "Yesterday I got seen, really seen. And yes, maybe they'll change their minds, or I'll mess up, or this will all fall apart. But at least for one day, someone looked at me and saw more than a housekeeping uniform. That's worth the risk." Marcus nodded slowly, processing. "Grandma would be proud of you." The words hit harder than Nia expected, emotion closing her throat. "Yeah," she managed. "I think she would." They ate in comfortable silence, and Nia was struck by how grown-up her son seemed. When had that happened? When had he gone from being a kid who needed her for everything to this young man who could see her fear and offer reassurance? The years had passed in a blur of survival, and she'd missed noticing his transformation. Zoe wandered out at 7 a.m., sleepy-eyed and trailing her favorite dolphin blanket. "Is it true? About the new job?" "It's true, baby." "So we're rich now?" Nia laughed, pulling her daughter into a hug. "We're comfortable now, not rich, but comfortable enough that we don't have to worry about every dollar." "Can we get the fancy cereal, the kind with the chocolate pieces?" "Yes, we can get the fancy cereal." Zoe's face lit up like Nia had promised her the moon, and it broke her heart a little that chocolate cereal was enough to constitute a major life improvement. But that was going to change. Everything was going to change. She got the kids ready for school, made sure Marcus had his lunch and Zoe had her homework, and walked them to the bus stop just like every other morning. Except this morning she wasn't wearing her housekeeping uniform, and she wasn't heading to the Meridian Grand to clean up after people who'd never see her. This morning she was about to walk into Apex Technologies as someone who mattered. The bus arrived and her kids climbed aboard. Marcus gave her a quick hug, rare at his age, and Zoe squeezed her tight enough to wrinkle the teal blouse. "Good luck, Mama. You're going to be amazing." Nia watched the bus pull away, then checked her phone. 7:45 a.m. Apex headquarters was a 30-minute train ride from her neighborhood, and she needed to arrive by 9. She had time, but barely. The morning commute was different when you were heading somewhere with purpose rather than just surviving another shift. Nia sat on the red line watching Chicago wake up around her. Other commuters with their coffee and phones, students heading to classes, the whole city in motion. She used to feel invisible here too, just another body in the crowd. But today she felt like she was moving towards something instead of just away from poverty. Apex Technologies occupied 12 floors of a glass tower in the Loop, the kind of building Nia had walked past 1,000 times without ever imagining she'd enter as an employee. The lobby was all marble and steel, with a massive reception desk and security turnstiles that required badge access. She approached the reception desk, suddenly hyper-aware of her discount store clothes and her worn purse, and all the ways she probably looked wrong for this space. "Hi, I'm Nia Caldwell. It's my first day. I'm supposed to meet with Jessica Park?" The receptionist, a young man with perfectly styled hair and a smile that was probably practiced, typed something into his computer. "Ms. Caldwell, yes, we've been expecting you. Let me call up to HR. They'll bring you a temporary badge and get you started on orientation." Within minutes, a woman named Patricia from Human Resources appeared with a clipboard and an efficient smile. "Welcome to Apex. I'll be handling your onboarding today. We have quite a bit to cover: paperwork, benefits enrollment, IT setup, security clearance, building tour. Should take most of the morning." What followed was a whirlwind of forms and explanations and information that made Nia's head spin. Health insurance with multiple plan options. She'd never had choices before, just whatever basic coverage the hotel provided. Dental and vision included. 401k with company matching. Patricia explained it 3 times before Nia fully grasped that Apex would literally give her free money for her retirement. Life insurance, disability coverage, paid time off that actually accumulated instead of disappearing if she didn't use it fast enough. "You get 3 weeks vacation to start," Patricia explained, marking boxes on forms, plus sick days, personal days, and 10 paid holidays. After 2 years, it increases to 4 weeks vacation. Nia stared at her. 3 weeks? People actually take that much time off? Patricia's smile shifted to something more sympathetic. "Yes, and we encourage you to use it. Burnout helps no one. Mr. Rourke is very particular about work-life balance for the executive team." Executive team. The word still felt foreign, like they were describing someone else's life. The IT department set her up with a laptop, phone, and access credentials. The security team took her photo for her permanent badge. Patricia walked her through the employee handbook, policies on harassment, discrimination, professional conduct, expense reimbursement. Everything was documented, official, protected in ways Nia's previous employment never had been. "Any questions so far?" Patricia asked as they finished the last form. "When do I get paid?" The question came out before Nia could stop it, revealing her desperation in a way that made her cringe. "I mean, the signing bonus. They said within 48 hours?" Patricia checked her notes. "Accounting is processing it today. You should see the direct deposit hit your account by end of business Friday. And for future reference, regular payroll runs bi-weekly on Fridays. You'll be on the next cycle starting next week." $5,000 by Friday. The number still didn't feel real, but Nia needed it to be real because her rent was due on the 1st, and she was already 3 days late. She'd been planning to ask her landlord for an extension, the same humiliating conversation she'd had too many times before. But if the money came through Friday, she could pay rent with money left over. Actual money left over, not just pennies scraped from couch cushions. At 11 a.m., Jessica appeared in the HR conference room where Nia had been drowning in paperwork. "Ready for the fun part?" "The fun part?" "Shopping trip. Come on, we're playing hooky from orientation for a few hours. Patricia, we're stealing her." Patricia laughed and waved them off. "Go! The rest can wait until Monday." Jessica led Nia out of the building and into the cold December air. They walked 3 blocks to a shopping district Nia had never entered before, the kind where even the window displays screamed expensive. "We're going to Nordstrom first. They have personal shoppers who understand corporate wardrobes." Jessica, "I can't afford—" "Company credit card, remember? This is a business expense. You're representing Apex in client meetings, which means you need to look the part. Consider it professional equipment, same as your laptop or phone." The personal shopper, a woman named Diane, who had the kind of effortless elegance Nia associated with old money, took one look at Nia and immediately understood the assignment. First professional wardrobe? Is it that obvious? Only because I've done this hundreds of times? Don't worry, we'll get you set up. Diane started pulling pieces with practiced efficiency. Tailored pants in charcoal and navy, silk blouses in jewel tones, blazers that were structured but not stiff, a dress suitable for formal meetings, comfortable but professional shoes. You want to project authority without trying too hard. Quality pieces in classic cuts that you can mix and match. Nia tried on outfit after outfit, watching herself transform in the dressing room mirror. With each change of clothes, she looked more like the executives she'd seen at Apex, less like the woman who'd been invisible for so long. It should have felt like a costume, but instead it felt like she was finally seeing her real self, the person she might have become if circumstances had been different, if college hadn't been cut short, if survival hadn't consumed everything. "This is too much," Naya said quietly, watching the total climb on the register. $1,200, $1,500, $2,000. "I don't need all of this." "Yes, you do." Jessica was firm. "Nia, you're going to be in meetings with CEOs and international business partners. You'll be traveling, representing the company, making first impressions that matter. This isn't vanity. This is professional necessity. And honestly, $2,000 for a complete executive wardrobe is nothing compared to what some of our male executives spend on suits." The final total was $2,747. Jessica didn't even blink, just handed over the corporate card like it was pocket change. Diane arranged for everything to be delivered to Nia's apartment by Monday, and they left with Nia carrying just one bag containing outfits she'd worn in. She'd changed into new clothes for the rest of the day. Walking back toward Apex, Jessica said casually, "So Gavin wants to meet with you this afternoon. Just to check in, see how orientation is going, discuss the Liang partnership timeline." Nia's stomach clenched. "One-on-one? Is that a problem?" Yesterday he barely looked at me. Today I'm meeting with him like a colleague. It's disorienting." Jessica stopped walking, turning to face Nia directly. "Okay, real talk. Yesterday was insane. You went from invisible to indispensable in about 3 hours, and that kind of whiplash would mess with anyone's head. But here's what you need to understand about Gavin. He's brilliant at recognizing talent, even when it shows up in unexpected packages. He saw something in you that most people would have missed, and now he's betting on you. That's not charity. That's business instinct." "But what if I can't deliver? What if yesterday was just lucky circumstances and I'm actually Stop." Jessica's voice was gentle but firm. "Imposter syndrome is real, and almost everyone in our office has experienced it at some point, women especially. But you need to shut that voice down before it paralyzes you. You have skills that Apex desperately needs. You proved it yesterday. Today, you just have to keep proving it, one day at a time, until it becomes normal instead of terrifying." They resumed walking, and Naya tried to absorb that advice, to believe it. The problem was that years of invisibility had trained her to doubt herself, to assume that recognition was temporary and eventually someone would see through her and send her back to where she belonged. Except, where did she belong now? Not in housekeeping anymore. That door had closed. Not in her old life of struggling and scraping and choosing between bills. She was suspended between two worlds, and the only way forward was to commit fully to this new one, even if it felt like walking a tightrope without a net. Back at Apex, Jessica brought her to the executive floor. 11th level, all-glass offices and open workspace that somehow managed to feel both modern and comfortable. They passed conference rooms named after famous inventors, break rooms with coffee machines that probably cost more than Nia's monthly rent, and everywhere people who looked confident and purposeful and like they belonged exactly where they were. Jessica stopped at an office near the corner, not huge but respectable, with a window view of the Chicago skyline. "This is yours." Nia stepped inside slowly, taking in the desk and chair, the empty bookshelves, the blank walls waiting for personalization. There was a nameplate already sitting on the desk. Nia Caldwell, Director of International Relations. "It's real," she whispered, touching the nameplate like it might disappear. "It's real. You can start moving in Monday. For now, Gavin's office is down the hall. He's expecting you at 2 p.m. After Jessica left, Nia stood in her new office and let herself have 30 seconds of pure panic. Then she squared her shoulders, smoothed down her new blouse, and walked toward Gavin Rourke's office like she had every right to be there. His assistant, a man in his 30s named Christopher, smiled when she approached. "Ms. Caldwell, go right in. He's waiting." Gavin's office was what you'd expect for a CEO. Large, well-appointed, with the kind of view that probably cost extra in the building lease. But it wasn't ostentatious, just comfortable and professional. Gavin was standing at his window, phone to his ear, but he gestured for Nia to enter and sit. "I understand, but the timeline is firm. We need those components in production by March, or we miss our delivery windows. He listened for a moment, his expression hard. Then find a way to compress the schedule. That's why we're paying premium rates. Another pause. Good. Send me the revised timeline by end of day. He hung up and turned to Nia with a tired smile. Welcome to the glamorous world of corporate management. How's your first day going? Overwhelming, but good. Jessica took you shopping? She did. The company credit card got a workout. Gavin sat down across from her, his manner more relaxed than yesterday's intensity. Good. You need to look the part, and I'm glad you didn't fight too hard about it. Some people have trouble accepting help even when it's clearly practical. I almost did fight it, but then I realized you were right. This is professional equipment, not charity. Exactly. He pulled up something on his computer. So let's talk about next steps. The Liang partnership is moving forward. Their legal team is reviewing our revised contract terms and should have feedback by next week. Once we get their input, we'll need to finalize everything, which will probably require another in-person meeting, probably in January, either here or in Shenzhen, depending on their preference. Shenzhen? Nia tried to keep her voice steady. As in China? As in China. You've never traveled internationally? I've never traveled outside Illinois. Gavin's eyebrows rose slightly. Well, you're about to get a crash course. International travel is a significant part of this role. We have manufacturing partners in China, Taiwan, Vietnam, and South Korea. Distribution relationships in Europe and South America. You'll be visiting these partners regularly, attending trade conferences, handling on-site negotiations. The scope of what he was describing hit Nia like a wave. She'd been so focused on surviving the transition from housekeeping to executive that she hadn't fully processed what the job actually entailed. International travel meant passports and visas and being away from her kids for days at a time. It meant navigating foreign cities and cultural expectations and business environments she'd only read about in textbooks years ago. I can see you panicking, Gavin said calmly. Don't. We'll handle logistics, you'll travel with other team members until you're comfortable going solo, and everything will be expensed. Your kids will be fine. We have corporate partnerships with childcare services for exactly these situations. And honestly, most of our trips are 3 to 5 days maximum. You'll be gone less than someone with a normal commuting job. It's not just the logistics, Nia struggled to articulate the fear. What if I mess up? What if I'm in a meeting in Shenzhen and I misunderstand something culturally important and it costs us the relationship? Then you'll learn from it. We'll recover and you'll do better next time. Nia, I'm not expecting perfection. I'm expecting competence and growth. Everyone makes mistakes in international business. I've certainly made my share over the years. The difference between good employees and great ones isn't never messing up. It's how they handle the mistakes and what they learn from them. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. I'm going to tell you something that might help with the imposter syndrome you're clearly experiencing. 6 years ago, I hired a woman named Lauren Chen as our VP of Product Development. She'd been working as a project manager at a mid-tier tech company, good but not exceptional. We brought her in for an interview about a senior manager position, and within 20 minutes I realized she was thinking about the role all wrong. She was thinking like a VP even though she'd never held that title. So I offered her the VP position instead. Know what she said? What? She said, I'm not qualified for that. I don't have the experience. And I told her, nobody's qualified for a job they haven't done yet. That's why we train people. She took the risk, and now she's one of our most valuable executives. The products she's developed have generated over $200 million in revenue. Gavin stood up, moving to his window. The point is, we're not hiring you for what you've already done. We're hiring you for what we think you can become. And yesterday, you gave us evidence that our instincts are right. You walked into an impossible situation and not only survived it, but excelled. That doesn't happen by accident. But what if yesterday was the peak? What if I can't maintain that level? Then we'll reassess and figure out what support you need, but I don't think that's going to happen. He turned back to her, his expression serious. Nia, I've been in this business for 20 years. I've hired hundreds of people, and I've gotten pretty good at recognizing potential. You have something that can't be taught: cultural intelligence, linguistic fluency, and strategic instincts that come from understanding how to navigate between different worlds. Those are rare, valuable skills. The rest, the corporate processes, the technical knowledge, the professional polish, all of that can be learned. There was a knock on the door, and Christopher stuck his head in. Sorry to interrupt, but Chairman Liang's office just called. They want to schedule a video conference for Monday to discuss the contract revisions. Should I coordinate with Ms. Caldwell's schedule? Gavin looked at Naya. You ready for your second negotiation? Her heart was racing, but she nodded. Yes. After Christopher left to set up the meeting, Gavin returned to his desk. One more thing. Your compensation package includes performance bonuses tied to successfully closed deals. The Liang contract is the first, but we're working on partnerships with 3 other Asian manufacturers. Each successful negotiation earns you a percentage bonus. Do well, and your income could significantly exceed the base salary we discussed. How significantly? Last year, our VP of Sales made $340,000 total with bonuses. Her base salary was $140,000. The rest was performance-based. He let that sink in. I'm not guaranteeing you'll hit those numbers immediately. She'd been in her role for 5 years, but I'm saying the opportunity exists if you're willing to work for it. Nia thought about Marcus and his engineering dreams, about Zoe and marine biology camp, about her mother who died without ever seeing her daughter escape the poverty that had defined both their lives. She thought about all the years of being invisible, all the moments of swallowing pride and accepting less than she deserved because survival required it. I'm willing to work for it, she said firmly. Good, Gavin smiled. Then welcome to Apex Technologies, Director Caldwell. Try not to let the imposter syndrome eat you alive. The rest of the afternoon was a blur of meetings, with IT to finalize her tech setup, with finance to go over expense reporting procedures, with Jessica's team to discuss the upcoming Liang video conference and what preparation she'd need. By 5 p.m., Nia's brain felt like it had been put through a blender, but she'd survived her first day. She took the train home in her new clothes, carrying shopping bags full of professional attire and a laptop bag with the Apex logo embossed on it. Other commuters probably saw just another businesswoman heading home after work, unremarkable and normal. They had no idea she was still adjusting to being visible, still processing the fact that 24 hours ago she'd been emptying trash bins. Marcus and Zoe were already home when she arrived. Her neighbor Mrs. Kim had picked them up from school, a favor Naya had arranged this morning. Both kids looked up when she walked in, taking in her transformed appearance. Wow, Mom, Zoe breathed. You look like people on TV. Marcus was more analytical. How was it? Was it weird? So weird, but also good. Nia set down her bags and pulled them both into a hug. I have an office with my name on it, and a window, and people who actually listen when I talk. Are they nice? Zoe asked. The people you work with? Yeah, actually, they are. They're treating me like I belong there, even though I keep waiting for someone to realize I don't. You do belong there, Marcus said with teenage certainty. You're smart, and you speak Chinese, and you know business stuff. Why wouldn't you belong? Out of the mouths of 13-year-olds, Naya thought, sometimes the simplest perspective was the truest one. They made dinner together. Actual food, not just cheap pasta, because Nia had stopped at the grocery store on the way home and bought chicken and fresh vegetables without calculating every dollar. The chicken was on sale, sure, and she still checked prices by habit, but the difference was that she could afford not to buy the cheapest option if something else looked better. That small freedom felt revolutionary. Over dinner, she told them about her day in edited terms, the office, the shopping trip, the upcoming video conference with China. She didn't mention the panic attacks, or the imposter syndrome, or the terror that kept threatening to overwhelm her. They didn't need to carry her fear. They just needed to see that their mother was building something stable. After the kids went to bed, Nia sat at the kitchen table with her new laptop, reviewing documents Jessica had sent about the Liang manufacturing partnership. Technical specifications, production timelines, quality standards, all of it dense and complex and exactly the kind of material she'd need to master if she was going to succeed in this role. Her phone buzzed with a text from Tanya. Day 1 survival check, you alive? Nia smiled and typed back, alive, exhausted, terrified, but I think I'm actually going to make it. Proud of you, girl. You're doing what most people only dream about, completely changing your life. Don't forget us little people when you're fancy and important. Never. You're stuck with me. But as Nia set down her phone and returned to the documents, she realized Tanya had a point. She was changing, transforming into someone new. The question was whether she could hold on to the parts of herself that mattered, the empathy, the understanding of struggle, the memory of what it felt like to be invisible, while also becoming the person this new life required her to be. She studied until midnight, absorbing information about manufacturing processes and international trade regulations and cultural business practices. When she finally closed the laptop and went to bed, her mind was still spinning with details and deadlines and the massive responsibilities she'd accepted. But underneath the anxiety was something else, something she'd almost forgotten how to feel. Hope. Real, tangible hope that her life could be different, that her kids could have better, that maybe, just maybe, she could be more than someone who cleaned up other people's messes. She could be someone who solved problems, built partnerships, and mattered in rooms where decisions were made. She just had to believe it herself before anyone else would. Monday's video conference with Chairman Liang began at 8 a.m. sharp, which meant 10 p.m. in Shenzhen, a detail that reminded Nia just how seriously they were taking this partnership. She sat in the main conference room surrounded by Gavin, Jessica, Richard, and David, her new laptop open with notes she'd spent the entire weekend preparing. The weekend that should have been restful had instead been consumed by studying contract terminology, researching Chinese manufacturing regulations, and practicing translation of technical phrases until her brain felt like it might short-circuit. When Chairman Liang's face appeared on the screen, Nia felt the familiar jolt of performance anxiety mixed with something new, confidence maybe. Or at least the memory of confidence from Friday's success. He looked tired but alert, Vice President Chen visible beside him along with Kevin Zhang and two other executives Nia didn't recognize.
梁董事长，晚上好，感谢您在这么晚的时间与我们会面。Good evening, Chairman Liang.
Thank you for meeting with us at such a late hour. Chairman Liang's expression warmed slightly at hearing Mandarin. 考德维尔女士，很高兴再次与您交谈。我们审查了修订后的合同条款，总体上我们很满意。Miss Caldwell, it's good to speak with you again. We've reviewed the revised contract terms, and overall, we're pleased. The overall signaled there were still issues to resolve, and Nia braced herself as she translated. The next 90 minutes were intense but manageable. Discussion of delivery schedules, quality checkpoints, payment terms, and warranty provisions. Each time a potential conflict arose, Nia found herself not just translating words but reading the subtext, the cultural implications beneath the surface language. When Vice President Chen raised concerns about intellectual property protections, his phrasing in Mandarin was more aggressive than his actual intent. Nia softened it slightly in translation while preserving the seriousness. Vice President Chen wants to ensure that any proprietary manufacturing processes Liang develops for these components remain protected. He's asking for clarity on IP ownership rather than expressing distrust. Gavin caught on immediately, responding in a way that addressed the concern without escalating. We absolutely respect Liang Manufacturing's intellectual property. Any innovations you develop remain yours. We're licensing the manufacturing capacity, not claiming ownership of your processes. When Nia translated this back to Mandarin, she added the cultural reassurance that would resonate. 罗克先生强调，我们寻求的是伙伴关系，不是所有权。您的创新和工艺始终属于良制造，这是我们对相互尊重的承诺的一部分。Mr. Rourke emphasizes that we're seeking partnership, not ownership. Your innovations and processes always belong to Liang Manufacturing. This is part of our commitment to mutual respect. Chairman Liang nodded slowly, the tension easing. 这是可以接受的，让我们继续。This is acceptable. Let's continue. By the end of the call, they'd resolved every outstanding issue. Chairman Liang proposed they sign the final contract in person, a ceremony, he called it, that would mark the formal beginning of their partnership. I would like to travel to Chicago in 3 weeks, if that's acceptable. We can sign the contract, tour your facilities, and perhaps share a meal to celebrate. After they disconnected, the conference room erupted in barely contained excitement. Richard was already pulling up logistics for Chairman Liang's visit. Jessica was texting the legal team to finalize contract language. David was updating financial projections. And Gavin was looking at Nia with an expression that was becoming familiar, impressed respect mixed with something like vindication. You did it again. You didn't just translate, you navigated. You caught that IP concern and reframed it before it became a problem. That's the job, right? Nia tried to sound casual, but inside she was vibrating with the adrenaline of success. That's exactly the job. He stood, gathering his papers. Christopher will coordinate with you on the signing ceremony details. We'll want this to be impressive. These kinds of moments matter for relationship building. Plan on being heavily involved in every aspect. The next 3 weeks blurred together in a way that would have been overwhelming if it hadn't been so purposeful. Nia threw herself into work with an intensity born from equal parts enthusiasm and terror of failing. She arrived early, stayed late, and spent every spare moment learning everything she could about international business practices, manufacturing logistics, and corporate protocol. Her office slowly transformed from an empty shell into an actual workspace. She added photos of Marcus and Zoe on her desk, a small Chinese calligraphy print her mother had given her years ago, books on international trade and cross-cultural communication. Jessica laughed when she saw the growing collection. You know we have a corporate library, right? You don't have to buy all these yourself. I know, but I wanted my own copies. Something about physically owning the books makes the knowledge feel more permanent. What Nia didn't say was that having proof of her expertise visible on her shelves helped convince her this was real, that she belonged in this office with her name on the door. The signing bonus hit her bank account on Friday as promised, $5,000 that transformed overnight from an abstract concept into actual accessible money. Nia sat at her kitchen table at 6 a.m., checking her phone over and over, hardly believing the number on the screen. She paid her rent immediately, 2 months in advance just because she could. She paid off the medical debt she'd been carrying since her mother's death. She bought Marcus the graphing calculator he'd needed for months, and enrolled Zoe in the marine biology camp that didn't start until summer, but required deposits now. And then, because she was still learning how to have money without panic, she opened a savings account and put $1,000 into it. Emergency money, future money, the kind of cushion she'd never had before. Marcus found her crying at the kitchen table, staring at bank statements. Mom? What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. I'm not used to things being right. He sat down across from her, this kid who'd grown up too fast learning to read her moods and manage her stress. It's okay to be happy, you know. You don't have to keep waiting for something bad to happen. When did you get so wise? I've had a good teacher. He grinned, and Nia realized with a shock that her son was going to be okay. Both her kids were going to be okay. Not just surviving, but actually thriving, because their mother had finally stopped being invisible. At work, preparations for the signing ceremony consumed everyone's energy. They were planning for Chairman Liang and a delegation of 5 to spend 2 days in Chicago, contract signing on day 1, facility tours, and relationship building on day 2. Nia coordinated with the hotel for accommodations, planned a formal dinner at a restaurant that specialized in authentic Chinese cuisine, and worked with the facilities team to prepare conference spaces that would impress without seeming like they were trying too hard. The attention to detail was exhausting, but also exhilarating. Jessica had been right. This wasn't just about translation. It was about orchestrating an entire experience that would reinforce Liang Manufacturing's decision to partner with Apex. Every choice mattered. The quality of the hotel, the menu selections that honored Chinese preferences, the car service that would meet them at the airport, even the gift Apex would present. A custom piece from a local artist that Jessica and Nia had spent hours selecting. You're thinking like an executive, Jessica observed one afternoon as they reviewed the schedule for the 20th time. You've stopped asking permission and started making decisions. That's growth. I'm terrified I'm going to mess something up. What if Chairman Liang hates the hotel? What if the restaurant gets the menu wrong? What if... Then we'll handle it. But Nia, you need to trust yourself. You know what you're doing. You've proven it multiple times now. Jessica paused, then added more quietly. You know what I think? I think you're so used to being in situations where one mistake could cost you everything. Your job, your housing, your kids' stability, that you can't quite believe you're in a situation now where mistakes are fixable, where you have resources and support and people who want you to succeed. The observation hit harder than Nia expected. Jessica was right. She'd spent so many years in precarious survival mode that even now, with a stable salary and an office and colleagues who respected her, she couldn't quite shake the hypervigilance that had kept her alive through the hard times. How do I stop feeling like that? Nia asked. Time, mostly, and evidence. Every day that you succeed, every problem you solve, every moment someone treats you like you belong, all of that slowly rewrites the story you tell yourself about who you are and what you're worth. 3 days before Chairman Liang's arrival, Gavin called an impromptu meeting with Nia in his office. She'd learned to read his moods by now. This was serious, but not crisis level. Important, but not panicked. I got a call from Chairman Liang this morning, he began without preamble. He had an interesting request. Nia's stomach clenched. What kind of request? He wants you specifically named in the contract as the designated liaison for the partnership. Not just Apex Technologies generally, you, by name, as the primary contact for all communications, problem solving, and relationship management. The words took a moment to process. He wants me in the contract? More than that, he's offering to have Liang Manufacturing cover half your salary as part of the partnership terms. It's not standard, but it's not unheard of either. Basically, he's saying you're valuable enough to the relationship that they want financial stake in ensuring you stay in this role long term. Nia sat down slowly, her mind racing through implications. What does that mean for me practically? It means you're not just an Apex employee anymore. You're a shared resource between two companies. It means job security like you wouldn't believe, because both organizations have invested in you. It means if you ever wanted to leave Apex, you'd have Liang Manufacturing as a reference and probably a standing job offer. And it means, Gavin smiled slightly, it means Chairman Liang sees what I saw, that you're exceptional at something most people can't do. But why? We've had one successful negotiation and one video call. That's not enough to... It is when someone recognizes talent. Nia, do you know how rare it is to find someone who's not just bilingual, but culturally fluent? Who can navigate between American and Chinese business expectations without making either side uncomfortable? Who has the strategic intelligence to prevent problems before they escalate? He leaned forward. You're not just translating words, you're translating worlds. That's invaluable. That evening, Nia called Tanya and told her everything. Her friend listened quietly, then said, "Do you remember what you told me 2 months ago? You said you felt like you were disappearing, like you'd become so invisible that even you couldn't see yourself anymore. And now you're literally written into international contracts as an essential person. You're the opposite of invisible. I'm terrified I'll wake up and this will all be gone." Then stay awake. Keep showing up. Keep being exceptional. Tanya's voice was firm. And maybe, eventually, you'll stop being surprised that people see your worth. Chairman Liang arrived on a Thursday morning in mid-January, and despite all the preparation, Nia still felt her heart hammering as she waited in the Apex lobby. She dressed carefully in one of her new suits, navy blue with a silk blouse in burgundy, professional but not severe. Her hair was styled, her makeup understated, her credentials were ready. She looked like she belonged here, even if part of her still felt like an imposter. When the delegation walked through the doors, Chairman Liang's face lit up with recognition. He crossed the lobby directly to her, bypassing Gavin and the other executives who'd gathered for the formal greeting. "Cao de wei nu shu, hen gao xing jian dao nin." Miss Caldwell, it's good to see you. "Liangdong Shuchang, 欢迎来到芝加哥。我们很荣幸能接待您." Chairman Liang, welcome to Chicago. We're honored to host you. The formality of the exchange set the tone. Respectful, professional, warm, without being presumptuous. Gavin stepped forward to offer his own welcome, and Nia smoothly facilitated the introduction of all the team members, making sure titles and roles were clearly communicated in both languages. The contract signing ceremony took place in Apex's largest conference room, which Nia had personally overseen being set up with both American and Chinese elements. US and Chinese flags positioned respectfully, documents prepared in both languages, photographers positioned to capture the moment without being intrusive. It was theater, really, corporate theater, but Nia had learned that these symbolic moments mattered as much as the actual business terms. When Chairman Liang and Gavin sat down at the table with their respective teams flanking them, Nia stood between them, literally between the two leaders, translating the formal remarks each made about partnership and mutual success and long-term collaboration. She was hyper-aware of being the bridge, the connection point that made this entire relationship possible. After the signatures were complete and photographs taken, Chairman Liang requested a private word with Gavin. Nia translated as they moved to a smaller conference room, just the three of them, plus Vice President Chen. 罗克先生，我想讨论考德维尔女士在我们合作伙伴关系中的角色。Mr. Rourke, I want to discuss Miss Caldwell's role in our partnership. Gavin nodded for Nia to continue translating without interruption. 我在商业领域工作了40年，我遇到过许多翻译和联络人，但考德维尔女士不同寻常。她不仅理解语言，她理解意图；她不仅传达信息，她建立信任。这种技能非常罕见，我想确保它继续在我们的合作关系中发挥核心作用。I have worked in business for 40 years, and I have encountered many translators and liaisons. But Ms. Caldwell is unusual. She doesn't just understand language, she understands intent. She doesn't just convey information, she builds trust. This skill is exceptionally rare, and I want to ensure she continues to play a central role in our partnership. As Nia translated his words into English, she felt something shifting inside her, the final dissolution of the belief that she didn't deserve this, that it was all luck or charity. Chairman Liang wasn't being kind. He was being practical. He'd recognized value and was taking steps to secure it. I completely agree, Gavin said. In fact, I've already started discussions about expanding Nia's role to oversee all our Asian partnerships, not just Liang Manufacturing. She's too valuable to limit to a single relationship. When Nia translated this back to Mandarin, Chairman Liang smiled. 明智的决定，好的人才应该被充分利用，而不是被限制。A wise decision. Good talent should be fully utilized, not limited. That evening's dinner was at a restaurant Nia had carefully vetted. Authentic Cantonese cuisine prepared by a chef who'd trained in Hong Kong, private dining room that allowed for conversation without distraction, staff who understood the importance of impeccable service. She'd even coordinated with the sommelier to select wines that would pair well with Chinese food, a detail that earned an approving nod from Vice President Chen. During the meal, the conversation flowed between business and personal, serious and lighthearted. Chairman Liang asked about Nia's children, and she found herself talking about Marcus's engineering aspirations and Zoe's marine biology obsession. Kevin Zhang, the technical director, mentioned his own daughter who was studying environmental science, and suddenly they were comparing notes on raising kids who were smarter than their parents. It was in these moments, translating stories about children and education and hopes for the future, that Nia realized what she'd actually built. This wasn't just a business relationship. It was a human connection that transcended cultural and linguistic boundaries. She was the person who made these connections possible, who helped people from different worlds understand each other not just intellectually, but emotionally. The second day included facility tours where Nia guided Chairman Liang's team through Apex's manufacturing processes, explaining technical details while also managing the cultural exchange. When one of the Chinese engineers made a suggestion about improving a production workflow, Nia didn't just translate. She facilitated a spontaneous collaboration session where engineers from both companies worked through the idea together, sketching diagrams and sharing expertise. Richard pulled her aside afterward. That wasn't planned. That wasn't on the schedule. But it might have been the most valuable hour of the entire visit. You saw an opportunity and created space for it. That's high-level strategic thinking. By the time Chairman Liang's delegation departed for the airport, the partnership felt less like a contract and more like a relationship with roots. As they said goodbye in the hotel lobby, Chairman Liang took Nia's hand in both of his, a gesture of respect in Chinese culture that nearly brought tears to her eyes.
您改变了我们的合作方式，靠的为尔女士。您让商业变得人性化，这是一份礼物。You have changed how we do business, Ms. Caldwell. You make commerce human. That is a gift. After they left, Nia stood in the hotel lobby, the same hotel where just 6 weeks ago she'd been emptying trash bins in a gray uniform, and let herself feel the full weight of what she'd accomplished. She'd gone from invisible to indispensable, from cleaning up after people who never saw her to being specifically requested by international business leaders. Back at Apex the next day, Gavin called an executive meeting where Nia was asked to present a strategic plan for expanding their Asian partnerships. She'd spent the previous evening preparing, and now she stood at the head of the conference table, the same conference table where she'd once wiped up spilled water, and delivered a presentation about market opportunities in Taiwan, Vietnam, and South Korea. The executives asked questions, pushed back on some of her assumptions, challenged her projections. And Nia held her ground, defended her reasoning, acknowledged where she needed more data, and promised to get it. She was thinking like an executive because she was an executive. The transformation was complete. That evening, she picked up her kids from school personally for the first time in weeks. Her schedule had been so demanding that she'd been relying on after-school care and favors from Tanya. But today she wanted to see them, to ground herself in what actually mattered. They went to the grocery store together, and for the first time in their lives, Nia didn't calculate every item's cost before putting it in the cart. Marcus wanted the name brand cereal instead of store brand? Fine. Zoe wanted fresh strawberries even though they were expensive? Sure. They needed new winter coats because the old ones were too small? They'd go to the mall this weekend and buy proper coats that would last. At the checkout, when the total came to $230 and Nia didn't flinch, Marcus looked at her with something like awe. Mom, are we really okay now? Like, for real? Yeah, baby, we're really okay. That night, after the kids were asleep, Nia sat at her kitchen table with her laptop and drafted an email to Gavin. She'd been thinking about it for days, an idea that felt audacious but also necessary. Gavin, I want to propose something. I've been thinking about my own journey from housekeeping to executive, and I keep wondering how many other people are out there with skills and potential that nobody sees because they're in the wrong position. People who speak multiple languages while working retail. People with advanced degrees who drive delivery trucks. People whose talents are invisible because they're wearing the wrong uniform. What if Apex created a program to identify and develop hidden talent? Not just external recruiting, but looking at people in support roles, admin staff, facilities, food service, and actively seeking their skills and ambitions. We could offer training, mentorship, pathways to career advancement. It would cost money, sure, but the ROI would be finding exceptional people before our competitors do. I'm living proof this works. Imagine what we could build if we did it systematically. Let me know if you want to discuss this further. I've already started drafting a detailed proposal. She hit send before she could second-guess herself, then closed her laptop and went to bed. The response came the next morning. Naya, this is exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need. Let's talk about this Monday. I think you're onto something that could change not just our company, but how corporate America thinks about talent development. This could be your legacy project. Interested? G. Legacy project. The word struck her as both impossible and inevitable. She'd gone from survival mode to actually thinking about legacy, about leaving something behind that would matter beyond her own life. Monday's meeting expanded to include Jessica, Amanda, and the head of human resources. Nia presented her vision, a comprehensive program to identify overlooked talent within the company and create pathways for advancement, skills assessments for interested employees, tuition reimbursement and training programs, mentorship pairings between executives and high-potential support staff, a formal commitment to looking beyond credentials to actual capabilities. We'd be finding our next generation of leaders from within, Nia explained, clicking through her presentation. People who already understand our culture, who've proven their work ethic, who just need opportunity and support to rise. The cost would be maybe $200,000 annually for a pilot program, but if we find even 2 or 3 people like, she hesitated, then pushed through. Like me? The value would be exponential. The HR director was taking notes,
furiously. This could also significantly improve retention and morale. Employees who see advancement opportunities stay longer and work harder. Amanda leaned forward. I love this. But Nia, you need to be prepared for pushback. Some executives will argue that people in support roles are there because that's their capability level. They'll say we're wasting resources on people who can't or won't advance. Then they'd be wrong. Nia's voice was firm. They'd be making the same mistake that almost cost Apex the Liang partnership. They'd be confusing position with potential. And honestly, if we have executives who can't see past job titles to recognize human capability, that says more about the executives than the employees. Gavin smiled. There's the confidence I was waiting for. All right, you've got approval to develop a full proposal. Work with HR to design the program structure. We'll pilot it for a year and assess results. If it works, and I think it will, we'll scale it company-wide. 3 months later, the Apex Advancement Initiative launched with 12 employees from various departments, administrative assistants, facilities staff, IT support technicians, all of whom had skills and aspirations that exceeded their current roles. Nia personally mentored 2 of them, Maria, a receptionist who spoke fluent Portuguese and Spanish and wanted to work in international business development, and James, a facilities coordinator with an unfinished engineering degree and remarkable problem-solving skills. Watching Maria present her first market analysis for Brazilian partnerships, Nia felt a profound sense of completion. This was what it meant to transform from invisible to influential, not just changing her own circumstances, but creating pathways for others to do the same. The Liang manufacturing partnership flourished over the following months. Production began on schedule, quality standards exceeded expectations, and the relationship expanded to include 2 additional product lines. Nia traveled to Shenzhen twice, to Taipei once, and to a manufacturing conference in Singapore where she represented Apex alongside executives with decades more experience. Each trip became less terrifying and more routine. Each negotiation built her confidence. Each success proved that the woman who'd spoken up in that conference room hadn't been lucky. She'd been ready. On a Thursday evening in late April, Nia received a text from Margaret Torres, her former housekeeping supervisor at the Meridian Grand. Saw an article about you in Chicago Business Journal. Rising star in international trade. Never thought I'd see someone who used to work for me featured like that. Congratulations. Nia stared at the message for a long moment, then replied, Thank you. And Margaret? I hope you know that the skills I was using to clean hotel rooms, attention to detail, cultural awareness, work ethic, those were the same skills I needed for this role. The job changed, but I didn't. I just finally got seen. The response came quickly. Food for thought. Take care of yourself, Nia. That weekend, Nia took Marcus and Zoe back to the Meridian Grand for lunch at the hotel restaurant, a small celebration of how far they'd come. As they walked through the lobby, Nia saw housekeeping staff moving through the space with the practiced invisibility she remembered so well. One woman, probably in her 40s, was replacing flowers in a vase near the entrance. Nia walked over to her. Excuse me, those flowers look beautiful. The woman looked up, surprised to be addressed at all. Thank you, ma'am. I used to work housekeeping here. I know how hard the job is, and I know how rarely anyone notices the work. So I wanted you to know. I see you. And you're doing excellent work. The woman's eyes went wide, then filled with tears, she blinked back quickly. Thank you. That means more than you know. As they walked away, Marcus asked quietly, Why did you do that? Because she's invisible to almost everyone who walks through this lobby, and I remember exactly what that feels like. Sometimes just being seen, really seen, can change everything. They had lunch overlooking the Chicago River, and Nia looked at her children. Marcus, who'd gotten his calculus tutor and was now acing his advanced math classes, Zoe, who'd been accepted to the marine biology camp and talked constantly about ocean conservation and felt the weight of transformation. Not just her transformation, but theirs. The generational cycle of struggle had been broken. That evening, back in their apartment that they'd soon be leaving for a better place in a safer neighborhood, Nia sat down to write. She'd been thinking about documenting her story, not for publication necessarily, but as a record for her kids, for other invisible people who might need proof that change was possible. She began, 6 months ago, I was emptying trash bins in a conference room where 6 people were having a breakdown about a problem I could solve in 3 seconds. I was invisible to them, just part of the furniture, unremarkable and easily replaced. Today, I'm Director of International Relations for a major corporation. My name is written into international contracts, and I'm creating programs to help other invisible people step into the light. This is the story of how I went from silence to speaking up, from invisible to indispensable, from surviving to actually living. And if it happened for me, it can happen for anyone who's brave enough to believe they're worth seeing. She saved the document and closed her laptop, then went to check on her kids one last time before bed. Both were asleep, peaceful and secure in ways they hadn't been 6 months ago. The apartment was quiet, except for the normal sounds of life, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of traffic, the gentle breathing of children who could finally dream without the weight of their mother's fear crushing those dreams. Nia stood in the doorway between their rooms and let herself feel everything. The gratitude, the disbelief that still occasionally surfaced, the fierce determination to never take any of this for granted, the profound awareness that her life had fundamentally changed because she'd done one simple, terrifying thing. She'd spoken up. She'd said, I can translate, into a room full of people who'd never seen her before, and everything that came after flowed from that single moment of courage. The job, the salary, the respect, the opportunity to create pathways for others, all of it had started with refusing to stay invisible. And now, standing in her apartment in the soft darkness, Nia Caldwell smiled, because she'd learned the most important lesson of all. The opposite of invisible wasn't just visible. It was essential. It was valued. It was seen. And once you'd been truly seen, not just looked at, but recognized for who you really were and what you could actually do, you could never fully return to the shadows. The light had found her, and she'd found herself in that light, and now she was using that visibility to illuminate paths for others, from housekeeping to international business development, from invisible to indispensable, from silence to speaking up and speaking out. The transformation was complete, and it was just beginning. Because Nia Caldwell had spent too many years being invisible. Now she was going to spend the rest of her life making sure that other invisible people got the chance to be seen, to step forward, to speak up and claim the spaces they deserved. One voice at a time, one opportunity at a time, one transformation at a time. And it all started with 3 simple words that changed everything. I can translate.